Okay, Chair, we're now live on YouTube.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody, and welcome to the West Northamptonshire Shadow Executive. Before we start the formal business, I think it's important that we take a few moments to reflect, express our thanks to many, many people. 1 year ago, we entered lockdown. No one could have imagined that 365 days later, we would still be living with restrictions. And I want to say a sincere and heartfelt thank you to everyone, everywhere, who's helped get us through the past 12 months. To all our staff at every level, in all our councils, in every department, thank you. We've kept over 95% of our services running. Pressure has moved from area to area in the past year, from the initial emergency response to settling into the business as unusual, to supporting our businesses with grants from government and supporting our communities and residents. All of this was made possible by the efforts of our staff, members and volunteers. Thank you, one and all. Singling out any individual is fraught with difficulty, but I must pay tribute to our Director of Public Health, Lucy Whiteman, and all her team for their great work in the past year. To Teresa Grant, Anna Earnshaw, George Candler, Richard Ellis, Ian Vincent, who've led the organisations through the most challenging period, I am most grateful. It was teamwork, and to all those who've led us through the various twists and turns of the pandemic, thank you. While many have put in long hours and 7-day working weeks, there is a cost to our families. To all partners, husbands, wives, children who've had to take second priority, again, I say to you, thank you. This pandemic has shown the great strength of working together with the police, the NHS, the councils, community groups, the voluntary sector, private companies, friends, families and neighbours, all pulling together with one aim, to get us through. Thank you. We have many reasons now to be hopeful. Our vaccination programme is providing a roadmap out of this in an irreversible way. To all those involved in that endeavour, Big Pharma, government, military, healthcare, council staff, volunteers and vaccine ambassadors getting the message across to those who are concerned, thank you. All of us have known someone who's had coronavirus. Many of us know someone who has sadly passed away from COVID-19. We have seen 111,641 excess deaths in the UK and almost 1,400 COVID deaths in this county. These are not statistics, but individual tragedies. Countless families touched by death and compounded in grief by rules that forbid proper mourning and large gatherings for comfort and support. To everyone who has suffered bereavement, I offer my profound and sincere sympathy. So before we continue the meeting, can I ask that we take a few moments in silence to remember those who we lost to COVID-19 in the past 12 months. Thank you. Let's see. No. So our first item of business is apologies for non-attendance. Paul?
No apologies received, Chair.
Any notifications to address the meeting? I have
Yes.
Councillor Roberts on items 18, 19 and 20, and Miranda Wixon on items 18 and 19. Any others?
Yes, Chair. Councillor Angela Roy wishes to address on item 19, which is her motion on food poverty.
Okay. Any declarations of interest? So the minutes of the last meeting have been circulated with the agenda. I think they start on page 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, which is the one that begins training and exercising. 14, which I think is the one with the table design and implementation begins. 15, I have starting with the table again that says highways. So this might be the wrong way around actually. 16, following good practice. Next page, transfer of monies from HRA. Next page, beginning this input contributed to the proposal. Next page, shared arrangements. Next page, beginning ICANN system partner procurement. And next page, the monitoring officer, and ending with exempt items. Is it your wish that we approve these as a true and accurate record? Agreed? Any against? I shall sign these later and post them to you, Paul. So, item 5, announcements. The only announcement that I wish to make now at this stage is again to say thank you to everybody who has actually contributed to the local government reform programme and got us to this stage. Earlier today we had our last joint implementation executive in which we thanked many people, but there are many people on the call and many not on the call who have done sterling work over the last 2 to 3 years to get us to this point where we are 1 week and 1 day from 1 week and 2 days from vesting day. So again, it's always dangerous to name people, but so I won't because I'll miss someone out. But everybody everywhere, can I just thank you for tremendous, and I know there's still a lot of work to do to get it over the line. And as I said earlier, to misquote Churchill, this is just the end of the beginning, and that we will be moving forward now with our plans in order to get ourselves and our new council up and running. It is still my ambition to be the best council in the country, as acknowledged by others. And I firmly believe that we will have a fresh start and a bright future. So item 6, Director of Transformations Programme update. Jane.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So just wanted to take everybody through the update. You should have all received the paperwork. I just wanted to start. We've started the first page just to remind you of the vision that we started this with. So to create the 2 best performing local authorities in the country. Obviously, we can't tell yet whether they're best performing, but we hope that that will be the long-term aim. But that was where we were getting to. And the mission for the Future Northants programme was to put our heart and soul into serving the citizens of Northamptonshire by designing, planning and implementing services that are safe and legal on day one. I'm very pleased to say we're absolutely on track to do that. The update, as you know, has information at a set point in time, and I'll just give you some verbal updates on some of those elements as we go along, if that's okay. So starting with the adult social care programme, as you can see, there was 2 main risks that we were concerned about from that. First one is the Eclipse system and data not being able to be split for day one. There has been absolutely sterling work by both the programme team and the SMEs within the adult services to get past this and make sure that we get to a point where we have a workable solution. You can see there was a mitigation there where we had a plan A, and there was a possible other plan if we had to move to it, which was plan B, and we had a plan C as well, so we could move. It would have consequences for billing and payments if we didn't hit it. I'm pleased to say that a go decision was made on the 19th of March, and it's on track to go live this weekend. So absolutely brilliant work there by everybody to get to that point. Care First, that you'll see there, that had a test day planned for 19th of March. The test day was successful, and so that's proceeding and on track as well. So that's the update on those. Children's Services and Education, as you know, they were on track to the place they needed to be. So those are all green. We haven't got any risks outstanding currently. There will be work to do on the other side, particularly with education, because we still have some hosted services that need to be disaggregated. But the progress on the services that were being disaggregated and the hosted elements have all gone to plan. Okay. The corporate programme, which currently in safe and legal terms has the biggest amount of critical deliverables in it. As you can see, there are still some outstanding risks, and that's a lot of that reason is because we have a number of things that can't be done until just before. So both legal and things like branding, where you can't change the brand until the day before that you're going to vest, because obviously we don't want to confuse our residents and our service users. So just to say, the first risk around the reaching agreement with new T's and C's, proposed terms were communicated, and there was a 2-week consultation that's happened with that. I think that's not quite finished, or if it has, I'm waiting for the update on that one. There was a risk that not all contracts be in place for vesting day. All of the work has been done around that to send out the letters to ensure that people know where they're transferring to. In terms of contracts, IAAs will be fully drafted. So the position with IAAs is we're 95% of the way there. They are, a few of them are just having final sign-offs off with services, but all of the main IAAs that we committed to be having done by day one are on track and should be finished and completed by day one from there. And that's been some really good work with Kath and the legal team to make sure that those come through, and the services responding really quickly to those. GDPR compliance on day one regarding the split of NCC data. Again, as you know, there was an issue of the split of data, or some systems could not be split. Pleased to say all the mitigations are in, so have been put into place. The ROPA, or the record of processing activity, is updated with all the data that should be in it. Customer contact and digital is all on track. The testing was undertaken for the website, and that has all gone very well. There'll be further testing after we go live, but at the moment, everything that needs testing prior to that has been done, and it's all working in the way that it should be. Okay, just to add to that, on day one, we will have rapid response teams in place to respond to any issues that might come out that we haven't seen so far in testing, but that will be available. Okay. And the ICT programme, again, this is around Eclipse. As I said to you, the go live decision was made on the 19th. The testing was successful that we had on the 12th, and it will be going, the live system will be put into place from this weekend. So good news with that. Finance, a couple of things to update you on there. So the process that should have been signed off for the financial reporting by the 26th of March has been signed off, and the risk around legacy systems being removed. Again, the timeline developed in the process was signed off as well, and is being put in place ready for vesting day. So those are on track. And finally, the PLACE programme was all green anyway. So everything that should be done under that has been done. And there's a few things that we're just working on to get in place, which is the delegations and the warrant cards, but good progress has been made, and they will be ready for day one. Okay, Chair, so I'm happy to answer any questions on any of that.
Thank you, Jane. I see Adele has got a question before I bring in Cabinet colleagues. Danielle?
Thank you very much. When I first read your reports, Jane, I was a bit alarmed and a bit worried for you and for all the staff, because the risks seemed very great. And so it's great to hear what progress has been made since the reports were produced and now. So thank you very, very much for that. I have got a couple of questions, though. One is, it seems to me that some of the service failure looking backwards, it was to do with structural things, and IT was one of those things. And so it seems to me that we need to have in-house capacity to firefight, to renew, to do all the updating that is needed to keep us efficient. So first question is about capacity going forward. The second question is a bit more problematic. We have worked for years and years and years to try and have an integrated approach to data so that we develop a holistic view of need within households. So whether it's children, a child and their siblings, the context that they're living in, and the same with adult social care. It seems to me that we are in danger now of having a very fragmented data sets where we have got to collect data from different sources before we get that holistic view. Can you give me any reassurance that that's not going to be happening?
Okay, I'll answer both of those, and then I'm not sure whether Anna will want to come in with anything further. So through you, Chair. So with regards to the capacity for IT, as you'll probably already be aware, the CIO has been appointed, a gentleman by the name of Chris Wales, who is very capable, has a really good background in building capacity. And one of the things that we've done to ensure that we stabilise as we come out of and past vesting days, to keep on some of those architects and those key skills in IT, to ensure that we get continuity. And Chris will be working alongside that to see what skills we already have and how we can use that extended capacity to upskill some of our own people to ensure we've got the right things in place. So he's working on a plan currently of how we do that. It's one of the areas that I'll be working very closely with in transformation terms to make sure we've got that right capacity. But it really is about getting our own people in and making sure we've got the skills to move forward in particular areas. Okay, so that's the first question. Second question, integrated approach to data. To be honest, I don't disagree with you. I think it is important that we get an integrated approach to data. And this is one of the key opportunities for me around transformation in the new world, is that we actually get the opportunity to join up some of that district and borough information with the county council information in the new unitaries. And not only that, we can work closer with our partners to try and find ways. Lots of the people, as you know, are the same clients, the same service users across the services. And part of the transformation, the ICT transformation, will be to look at how we're using systems. Can we use it better? How do we get better data sharing and better response to our service users and residents? Hopefully that answers it.
Thank you. Any Cabinet colleagues got a question? Okay, thank you, Jane. We shall. Is the financial part update from Audra next? Is Audra on the
Yes,
left?
Chair.
Chair, I'm happy to take this part.
All right, Martin.
Okay, so you've got a fairly detailed spreadsheet here. If you can just bring that up on the screen. The key figures to focus on is right at the bottom of this particular spreadsheet on the left-hand side. There's a figure of 454. That's a variance, an underspend against the costs associated with the programme so far, and that equates to 454,000. On the right-hand side of the spreadsheet, then you have a list of the savings and the profile of the savings and any anticipated slippage on those. And as a result, primarily of COVID, some of those savings have slipped in the current financial year, and some of those savings won't be delivered to the tune of 1.342 million. Just to be clear, that means that those savings won't be delivered at some point in the future. It's just that it won't be delivered in 2021, but will be carried forward and reprofiled and delivered in future years. The net impact of those two adjustments, so the underspend on the cost and the slippage in savings, comes to an overall adverse variance of 888,000 for this current financial year.
Which I don't think is any change from what we previously reported.
Very similar to previous months, yeah.
Yeah, it's been 0.8 something. I can't remember the last two digits, but it's been 0.8 something. Okay, any questions for Martin? No? Thank you. So we'll go on to day one assurance, day one readiness. George?
Thank you, Chair. So just a single slide which members will be familiar with. So this highlights the outstanding number of critical deliverables, and within those individual actions that need to be completed. And this graph shows the trajectory to get to 0 by the 31st of March, and those different coloured segments reflect the previous update that Jane was providing. In terms of progress, just to give you an up-to-date figure, we are now at 61 critical deliverables still to complete and 162 actions. So we are on track, set against the trajectory that you can see in front of you. Of those 162, 81 are corporate, and within those, approaching 40 are related to branding. So will only be done in that final last few days, approaching vesting day. So that's where you can see a slight steepness of pace on that graph that you can see there. So we're averaging and need to keep averaging about 20 actions a day. So we are now in that granular detail. We're now working on daily stand-ups with colleagues, Monday to Friday, and we have been doing so since January. The Strategic Delivery Director is joining in those to ensure that we get that final push in these last few days. And similarly, we've got a connection now with an officer from Adult Social Care, Katie Brown, who's providing a bridge between the subject matter experts who are driving this forward and the assistant directors who will take ownership of this as well going forward, particularly from day 2 actions. So on track, Chair, but certainly not complacent, and we know there's still a lot to be done in this final week or so. Thank you.
Any questions for George? Okay, and just please, George, pass back our thanks to everybody in the teams who are going to be working flat out now for the next week or so. Because it does look like it's very heavily bent towards the corporate, as you said. So we'll move on from that to the change managers. Liz.
Sorry, Chair, it's me that's going to do this bit.
Oh, okay.
Apologies.
Jane.
Thank you. So just to let you know, with the change management programme, obviously there's been a lot of work done by the change managers within in the services, and the formation of the team of change champions was one of the biggest things. So we've done a change management programme plan that's going to hand over to the next stage with the transformation team, and we've got change managers that are now appointed into the transformation teams to carry on that work, because what we know is that actually more of the hard work starts here, because we've got to make sure that that transformation comes through in the first few years to ensure that we deliver what we agreed with members we were going to deliver. So we've got day 1 critical deliverable plans. So the plan on the page has been created. We also have a large amount of ERP gold change activity going on, because that's a new system to the districts and boroughs particularly, and NBC are using it currently, but slightly different form. So there's some work that needs to be done, and we intend on ensuring that there are some NCC people who've been using it a long time buddied up with district and boroughs, which starts to build relationships, but also helps to engage people in learning and various, and all the things that go alongside that. MS365 NCC roller activity, it continues on. We are nearly there with it. I think there's a few bits where we've got people out in the field who haven't necessarily signed up, but we're going to work that through. And most of the people, so 90% of people have signed up in NCC now. And then we've got a number of workshops that will go on in the spring for change champions, and a number of change champions. We've still got 400 plus recruited. Sorry, we've still got a number recruited, and we want to carry on with that programme through the transformation to ensure service remain engaged at all levels. And then you've seen the facts about sheets and the change champion activity. Those have been out and about and out with the sovereign councils to ensure that people have all the information that they need, and all of that is placed on the FN hub. So happy to take questions, Chair.
Richard Ogre.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jane. We did talk last time about there's a lot of activity about the actual outcomes. And of course, there are various peoples within our organisation Some of them are really keen and some may not be so keen. Do you get a feel now we're getting closer as to the general buzz from our staff? Because obviously what's critical to our success are the outstanding staff we have and their approach to the new unitary. And that's a question and an observation. I'm really glad it's going post-vesting day to ensure that we develop and encourage and bring along our staff to make this one of the most successful councils in the country.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So I mean, one thing to say is obviously we connect with as many staff as we possibly can, and staff have been heavily engaged in inputting to the programme, and I cannot tell you how committed people have been, given that they've got COVID business as usual, to inputting to that. As with any large-scale change, there's an element of concern. Some of the outreach stuff that we've done particularly well, Anna or any of the directors have been very visible and have staff to ask questions who have reassured staff in lots of ways, but they are all wanting to see, I think, what the next stage is. So there will always be that a kind of unsettled piece where they're waiting to see what's in the transformation timeline, how is it going to work, when are their services going to be reviewed. So they're all aware that change is still to come. What I will say is that we've obviously got a very committed bunch of staff, and we need to learn lessons from some of the programme stuff where maybe we should have engaged earlier, we should have had more input from staff on the way through, and we should have done things in a slightly different way. And we're picking that all up with a transformation team approach to ensure that services are leading the way with any change that is happening within their own area, and ensuring that we listen to the experts on the front line. So I can't answer, Richard, exactly how everybody's feeling, but we are getting the experience now that people are more hopeful, more understanding, and are looking forward to seeing what the future holds.
Chair, can I just have a supplementary, please?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah,
sorry,
it is. We have so many change managers. I'm just, are we sensitive to? We must be sensitive to the way people are feeling, and obviously, COVID has caused a lot of people stress in all walks of life, especially people that work within public services. So I'm just, we haven't sort of taken our eye off the ball here. We do have our fingers on the pulse when it comes to the how our staff are feeling, because unless we understand that, then we may not be able to intervene or even come up with some sort of mitigating action to try and resolve some of their concerns.
Yes, absolutely. So we've got the change champions who feed in via the change managers, but in addition, we've also been doing weekly sessions with the ADs and any managers to ensure that they understand what's happening with the programme and to ask and raise any questions. We also have open emails, the FN hub, where anybody can raise an issue at any time, and we constantly update the frequently asked questions. So we are trying to use management lines to feed information through and get feedback to the best of our ability, obviously that whilst delivering the programme as well. So as far as I know, we have the information that we need. We can always do more, as you always can, and we will be looking to do more. But I'm confident that we've got a good line in to all of the services in different places.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Anna?
Sorry, was that me? Chair, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, Anna.
I didn't hear it was my name. Sorry, apologies. I just wanted to add really to that as a little bit of reassurance as well. As Jane says, we've been doing a lot of sessions. I've also done several live sessions with staff, and I was really pleased. I think in the first one we had almost 1,000 staff join the briefing that I did. And we opened up the opportunity for them to do two-way questions and answers. And then we've recorded all of the questions they asked, even if they weren't discussed on it, and then have done sort of FAQs back. And also we've opened up in terms of the Meet the Directors, blogs and opportunities for people to raise concerns privately. And I'm also pleased in a nice way that a number of staff have approached me directly to sort of ask questions. And I think it's sort of safe to say, I mean, consistently, the questions have been around where their service is sitting on day one, who their line manager is, and a little bit about systems. But generally, the feedback has been really, really good and really positive. And I think all people who've raised questions have had them answered. And then we've made sure we've shared everything with other people. I've got another one this week and then a third one next week as well. So on that basis, we really do hope to reach out to people and reassure them and also make sure they've got an opportunity to ask questions.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands up, so we move on to comms. Claire.
I'm afraid it's me again, Chair. I'm doing this one.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, just to take you through, obviously you've all had the papers again, but just to highlight a couple of key things. So we've done a number of info bursts, which is short sessions on key topics for staff. So that's been on things like ERP, things like the voice recognition, you know, all of those website things that are coming. So it's just allowing staff to drop in on topics that they're concerned about and giving them that interactive input virtually. We've done residents campaign, visions and values, and we've done on the day one comms, we've tried to engage staff in a different way. So things like spot the selfie, connecting creativity campaign to bring people together virtually and in offices. So we're just trying to do a load of campaigns that's both engage staff and residents from there. We launched the final phase of Day One Residents Awareness campaign. So that's on council tax bills, radio, buses, out-of-home advertising to ensure that we're bringing obviously our residents with us and they understand what's happening as much as they possibly can. And ongoing activity in residents magazines. We've got a number of next steps that take place. Oh, sorry, I should have added that Anna and Rob have done a number of media interviews on elections as well. So just keeping our residents generally engaged in the activity. Also, next steps, we've got continued ongoing promotion of Day One awareness. So that's important. That's both internal and externally. And lots of facts about sheets going alongside the work being done by change managers out to the staff to ensure that they understand any issues or anything that they're worrying about. We've got a facts about sheet to pick those up. That is much easier to read basically than the FAQs, which tend to be a bit long. And then it's ongoing support for Day One priority branding decision making. So we're pretty much there with the branding. So we know what we're branding in the first category, and that you should see all that starting to change over the next week or so as we put into place the new branding from the sovereign councils on the main buildings. And I think that's all I want to draw your attention to. So I'm happy to answer questions if anybody has any.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Richard again.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jane, again. Yeah, I had a radio interview, I think it was this last weekend, and I got caught out because I believe the Daventry District Council have done quite a lot in informing and people of what's going on, and until I realised that some people weren't actually getting some of our communications. So it brought me to work with my portfolio holder for communications to ensure that what we believe is happening with regard to the output of our communication strategy, and this particular one was Daventry Calling, to making sure that it is actually getting to where we think it's getting. It is getting into the household. So so the question is are we reassuring ourselves that the activities that we are doing is actually hitting home? I suppose that's easier to do when you have hits on websites, but I'm just wondering, are we doing a little bit of that quality assurance that we are actually delivering what we feel we're delivering? Thanks, Jane.
How do we measure it, Jane?
So, Chair, I think Rebecca, can I bring Rebecca in here now, if that's okay, because she has more of that detail, if that's okay.
Yeah, of
I
course.
love the way she passed the ball to you there, Rebecca.
That's right. No, it's a really, really good point. And evaluating the Day One campaign is something we've worked really hard on. So we've seen a really good response so far, and we've been measuring it in a range of different ways. So some of that's easier than others, like you say, with some of the social media content, some of the web content, we can be really clear on who's seen that. But also where we've been going around with some of the large display boards, with things like the bus campaign that's been, out and about obviously leaflets were sent to every household with their council tax bills. So we're kind of compiling feedback through a range of different ways, depending on the way that we've got that initial message out. But so far, I have to say the feedback that we've had has been really, really positive from residents and partners on that day one campaign. So it looks like we are reaching people. The other thing that we've been able to measure really clearly as well is the radio campaign. So radio listening has gone up during lockdown, and we're able to see, you know, where those listening figures are impacting and where we're reaching. So again, that's been really useful data.
Yeah, just to add to that point, yeah, and I'm really grateful for that reassurance. Sometimes it's a bit of a political jab to the ruling body, the ruling party, that the communications wasn't good enough. But I know how much hard work that you and your team have done to get this out, as well as Daventry as well. But it's showing that when we're asked that question and people accuse us of not having an effective communication strategy, we can come back and say, well, actually, we do test it, we do measure it, and you know, we're doing the best we can. So, so thank you for what you're doing, and that certainly reassures me. Thank you, Chair.
Lizzie?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that initially I was concerned about this area. In fact, so much so that I spoke to comms myself and had a meeting, because I didn't feel after Christmas and January that we were hitting the residents and businesses, and they really understood what was going on. But in the last sort of 3 weeks, I would say the feedback I've had is that people are feeling a lot more comfortable about this now and are understanding it more, whereas before I was getting criticisms from various avenues to say that they didn't know anything about it. So I think it is getting there. Probably not everyone, but I think the majority, and I think some of the stuff that I'm seeing out on social media is fantastic. It's really, really top class stuff. So well done.
Thank you. The strategy always was back end loaded, that there would be a bigger push literally around now. So that seems to be in order with what we planned. So any other questions on comms? No? Thank you. So we move on to the programme change report. End sport. Kerry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As laid out in the report, the end sport itself was on the blueprints, but the granular detail of the school swim service wasn't dealt with when the initial blueprints were put together. So this is about making sure we've made arrangements for the staff affected. It's a small team, but just to give members a bit of context, the school swim service has been delivered by End Sport on behalf of NCC for a number of years. And then when NCC spun out to become an independent company in October, the decision was taken because of the impact of COVID on that service, and because of the long-standing nature of some of the staff involved in that service and some of the liabilities that go with that, it probably wasn't the best decision to TUPE those staff to NCC. So they remain, to TUPE those staff to NSport. So they remain council employees, and we need to make sure that they are accounted for. So the change request is to say that the relationship management with NSport will sit with the North Authority for 12 months, as will the school swim service. And during that time, decisions will be made about the future of that service, alongside the reopening of leisure more generally, and whether that service remains within the authorities and is disaggregated, or whether there are other options for that sort of service in terms of the provider market. The school swim service, in terms of a statutory provision, the onus sits upon the schools to sort that out, and not all of them come to the council-run service. A number, probably the majority of schools, sort out their own arrangements for school swimming, but we still need to make sure that those that we do provide this service to are able to still get it from the council until we make a decision longer term about where it sits. So happy to take any questions, Chair.
Matt?
Yeah, it's not a question, it's just a little statement, just to say obviously support this, and I look forward to colleagues learning more about NSport, because it is an undervalued service. I think it's a really, really good service, including the swimming service, and it plays a real valuable part in getting through to the kids and delivering lots and lots of really good training. So I look forward to it moving on and going from strength to strength in the future, but happy to support this, Chair.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands indicating wishing to speak. So the Shadow Executive is recommended to approve the changes to the blueprint as outlined in Appendix A. Are we all in favour? Any against? That's carried, thank you. So item 8, West Northamptonshire policy adoption. Jane, are you going to introduce these?
Yeah, I'm going to introduce this. Thank you, Chair.
Oh.
Okay.
Sorry, Martin, were you waving at somebody else or were you wanting to speak? Oh, okay. Sorry. I think he was waving at somebody leaving the house. Apologies, Martin.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. So just to let you know, this is the first tranche, well, the main tranche of policies that we need to bring through to get to safe and legal on day one, for particularly from those place services. So the report contains 5 appendices, which are the policies for waste management, the enforcement policy, private sector housing enforcement and civil penalties policy for the regulation of housing standards, private sector housing assistance policy and housing allocation policy. The appendices hold all of the policies within them, and within the report it shows you the number of areas where there are slight differences. Now, I don't want to talk too long on it, mainly because I think there's some portfolio holders who would like to speak on the item as well for their relevant policies. But just to say that we're recommending that the Shadow Executive adopt these policies so we can have them in place and ready to use from day one, so that we are safe and legal within all of these areas. Okay, so I'll stop there, Chair, and then I know Councillor Bone wanted to speak on the housing ones.
Ian, you're muted. Ian, you...
Sorry, in order that we just keep a flow here, would it be easier just to go through them one at a time and say draft waste management policy? Has anybody got any comments on that?
Thank you, Chair. The policy that we've got in front of us sets out the waste services for West Northamptonshire's residents that will be provided at the curbside and at household waste recycling centres. It's been drafted by waste officers representing all 4 councils from the design principle of ensuring high quality and consistent services for our residents. Officers work through the detail of existing standards and have looked to harmonise policy across the 3 collection areas, levelling up to the highest standard where this is possible. The types of things that have been harmonised are the materials that are collected from the curbside and charges for bulky waste collection. It hasn't been possible to harmonise all aspects of the service for vesting day. For example, where there are contractual commitments like the 3 weekly collection service in Daventry, or where it would be costly, i.e. not charging residents for bins. Also, there are some issues such as charging for green waste collection that will be the subject of further review and further decisions to harmonise the charging policy for all West Northants residents. We're very aware that that waste is a very visible service, so officers are planning for a seamless transition on the 1st of April, with residents either not noticing a change to their waste services, or if they do, then noticing an improvement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anything else on waste? Okay, so we move on to enforcement policy. Is there anybody want to speak on enforcement? Richard and Adam are both waving up.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, the document is fine. It's what's required. It is the basis, the foundation, but it will need to be built upon. I've had a number of conversations this week with officers, and the first thing I want for all the public that are listening is that we want to have a firm but fair enforcement policy. We don't want West Northamptonshire to be a place to go to where people can breach regulations on the way they prepare their food, on the environment, on fly tipping, on HMOs and developers running coach and horses through conditions. We need to have an enforcement regime that actually makes the people of West Northamptonshire have trust and confidence in us as a statutory agency, ensuring that people comply with the rules and don't abuse them. So, I'm quite excited that we have a foundation here, but we need to get the culture right when it comes down to ensuring that these rogue landlords, developers that think they can do what they want, and organised crime involved in trading standard offences, etc., do not feel comfortable in West Northamptonshire. We've got to have that. Now, that will require a structure and assets to do that. I don't want to create a regime of tyranny within West Northamptonshire, but what I do want is I want the law-abiding people to feel that we are doing something about individuals that actually breach conditions and rules and put us at risk. So I've spoken to officers who are very keen to ensure we get that right balance, but that right balance will be achieved, I'm sure, Chair, as we go through into the new authority and as we develop this policy. As it stands, it's a start. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Chairman. I did raise my hand to speak on the refuse collection recycling.
Oh, apologies.
Yeah, I mean, I've got some concerns about the document. I think as a policy document, it doesn't quite do the job. It outlines the scope of our service areas, but as a member or as a member of the public, I don't think it provides enough detail for us to be able to clearly define what our expectations will be of officers and of the services that are being provided to residents. Just taking, for example, the litter picking, in layman's terms, on the side of trunk roads. The policy is that we aim to work with Highways England to resolve that. I mean, it's very, very vaguely worded, and subsequently on fly tipping, there doesn't seem to be an absolute service level agreement on how fly tipping will be responded to. The statement is that normally within 2 working days, fly tipping will be responded to. Now, fly tipping is one of the biggest concerns that residents have across our region. It's a source of extreme angst for many residents in my patch of Bugbrook Ward, and I want to see us mount a complete full frontal assault on fly tipping. I think we should be declaring war on fly tipping across West Northamptonshire, and it shouldn't just, there's a vague aspiration that we should be levelling fines or prosecuting people guilty of fly tipping. No, we should be explicit in saying that whenever there is evidence, sufficient to mount a prosecution, we shall do so. And there should be a clear service level agreement that fly tipping will be resolved within 2 days of being reported, so that members, when they know of incidents where it hasn't been tidied up within 2 days, can go back to officers and say, look, this was reported 48 hours ago, it hasn't been resolved, can we get a move on, please? That normally, I fear, is licensed to drive the coach and horses through the loophole within the policy area. And I think this, as a whole, the policy document needs to go to scrutiny at the earliest available opportunity to iron out the gaps in service level agreements, to iron out some of the vagueness where there were several references to depending on location, and that phrase crops up in a couple of areas, but it's not good enough for a councillor to go to a local resident and say, well, actually, I don't know when that should be resolved because it depends on the area, and that hasn't been defined in the policy document brought to me. There needs to be far more detail in these, so that we're not giving licence away from councillors to be able to set the policy that residents hold us to account for. So I just want to see far more detail in the policy, and I do have a further concern on the waste and recycling, the residual waste. I'm not clear in my mind, Chairman, whether in fact, what's being proposed as an aim, and I'll quote the document, the intention is to provide a consistent capacity of around 80 litres for residual waste per week. And we're then told that I think the standard bin size is 240 litres. So I've never measured the capacity of my wheelie bin, Chairman, but if I have a 240 litre capacity wheelie bin at my home in Northampton, and it's now only going to be collected every 3 weeks rather than every 2 weeks, then that represents potentially a significant service reduction. So I just need some reassurances that actually we are going to, as Councillor Lowett says, maintain the highest standards being provided to residents at this moment in time. And then we need to take this document back to scrutiny so that we get the detail that members require to be able to serve their residents' needs. And we need to declare a war on fly tipping, Chairman.
Okay. Well, the 80 litre bin is the narrow black bins. The sort of other ones are the 240s, the wider one. And I think what we're saying in the policy is you will get an 80 litre bin, which actually encourages recycling because it restricts your ability to send everything to landfill or incineration or however.
Oh, yes, actually, Chairman, if you don't mind, that one further clarification. Within the policy document, obviously, we've only just heard today that NCC have expanded the opening hours for the Sixfields Household Waste and Recycling Centre. The document in front of us this evening reflects the previous opening hours. Will it be our policy to continue those more extensive opening hours at Sixfields?
Well, I'll bring Anna in on that, but Phil Larratt is waving. He's got all the answers to all your questions.
I wouldn't say I've got them all, Chair, but I've got some of them. Yes, as far as the opening hours at Sixfields, yes, we will be continuing with those additional hours, and that is something that we issued a joint press release on, and that will go ahead. I agree with everything Adam says. We need a policy that is consistent and across West Northamptonshire. But I think one of the things we've got to remember, Chair, is the fact that we're operating under different contracts, and these different contracts have different specifications. So it is going to take us time to bring everything into to a level, bring everything up to the same service standard. Particularly when sometimes it's 7 years to run. So it will take time. But the overall aim is to level up. And I think fly tipping is an issue. And yes, there are performance indicators where we're required to clear them within two working days. And that is generally adhered to. However, I don't know where in some areas, we're finding that there's getting to be more and more hazardous waste, for want of a better word, being fly tipped, particularly asbestos. And it's not always possible to clean those fly tips within 2 days because you have to get in a special contractor to actually deal with it. So it's not that easy. But so we need to think about how we deal with fly tips where there are hazardous waste. And I agree entirely on the enforcement of fly tipping. We're lucky in Northampton that we've got neighbourhood wardens who go around and inspect fly tip and look for evidence so that we can prosecute. And I hope that could perhaps be extended further than Northampton in the future going forward. And I think the whole thing is, as I say, a policy for now, based on what we've got with the contracts we've got, but we will look to level things up and make it more West Northamptonshire focused as we go forward. And there are issues, Mr. Chairman, where we've had difficulties in the past, and I've often talked about graffiti removal under the M1, where there's a policy in one authority to remove graffiti, where there isn't in another. So graffiti gets cleared off the bridge to the middle of the M1, and then the other half of the bridge, of course, is covered in graffiti. These are the issues we're very mindful of, and I was talking to Fiona about these today, and these are the issues we know we've got to get to grips with. So and I think scrutiny will have a role to play in this going forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Lizzie.
Yeah, I'm pleased that we're having a big debate about this, because I personally am really worried about the amount of rubbish that I see on the roads and the fly tipping. I think it has gone and it's accelerated 100-fold. It's a question for Phil, but he disappeared there. Phil, 6 Fields, is it now open then 5-6 days a week? I can't remember how many days it's open, because we desperately need more opening times for that area.
The hours have been extended, Lizzie. They have been publicised. I haven't got them in front of me tonight, but I'll make sure you get them.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah, I think Jason sent an email out earlier about it. Richard?
Yeah, it's just really to add the debate, first of all, on the removal of graffiti. There's a lot of research. I think a lot of work was done in New York. It was called broken windows policy, whereby quick action is taken to remove graffiti. It actually deters and prevents stuff, and also has a massive impact on the way people feel about their communities. Now, I've seen that not only from the research in America, but also some work I did when I was in public services in a big community in Banbury. So those type of policies need to be adopted, and this is where going forward, I think Phil's right that there is so much more work we're going to be doing on this. With regard to the enforcement, I agree with Adam, and I'm up for joining the army on this war against fly tipping. But to again have a council area where people are frightened to fly tip because of the proactive and the investigative approaches we have to actually bringing people to justice, which goes back to the original one about the overall enforcement policy. Has to be one that is ambitious, that is proactive, and it's correctly resourced. Now, we've got to have all those discussions in the future, but I think we need to start building that political will to make things better in the enforcement across the board, Chair, now. And then we talk about how we're going to achieve that by structures and getting the right assets and getting the right teams and getting the right approach. But I'm excited that we've got a great chance. We've got a brand new council to actually develop that and get it right first time.
Thanks. So move on from enforcement and waste onto private sector housing enforcement.
Yeah, it's me. Okay, yeah, okay. There are 3 documents here. The private sector housing enforcement policy is the first one. And we are asked to review and agree the adoption of this policy. So it's basically an amalgamation of the existing private sector housing enforcement policies of the 3 sovereign councils. And what it aims to do is account for best practice and learning in the 3 different locality teams, and also encompass the recent changes in guidance, legislation, and some of the recent tribunal decisions to ensure that we're safe and legal on day one. The policy undertakes enforcement action and covers both civil penalties, cautions, and prosecutions in the magistrates' courts. And it's basically about bringing those landlords who seek to operate in a non-compliant way back into compliance. And it ensures that the continued operation of the private sector housing functions in the 3 sovereign councils continue post-vesting day. Just as a sort of a setting the scene, the number of private sector housing requests across the board at DDC was 88, NBC was 1,373, and SNC was 90. If we move on to the number of civil penalties issued, there were none in DDC and SNC, but there were 38 in NBC, and that value of those civil penalties amounts to £111,000. Also, just setting the scene here, NBC issued 607 multiple occupancy licenses. DDC operated 36 and SNC 9. And just out of interest, the total number of occupants in HMOs is 245 for DDC, 65 for SNC, and 6,059 for NBC. So there are basically 9 stages as to the process of assessment, and basically it's about striking a balance between harm, culpability, punishment, and deterrent. This will appeal to Richard. It's intelligence-led, and the level of risk on those complaints is assessed against 29 different hazards. And then it'll be action to whether it falls into category 1, which is serious risk, which includes life, or category 2, which is lower risk. Now, it applies to HMOs, I've already said, and an HMO basically is a high risk if 5 or more people, or 2 or more in one household. Licenses are currently granted for up to 5 years, but it can be less, and it can be reviewed at any time for those HMOs. This also covers empty properties, and authority can enforce sales. It can authorise compulsory purchase. It can action against illegal evictions, and it can also issue private sector housing civil penalties. So it's a really comprehensive document, and just in terms of consultation, I've been working very closely with the borough, having various meetings with all sorts of people, including Jonathan and MPH, but also every fortnight I meet with Stuart Lackenby, and of late with Joe Barrett, Jacqueline and Chris Stopford, so that we kind of try and combine as much information from across all parties. So any questions on that?
Any questions on that housing enforcement policy? No? Right, Lizzie, you're on a roll. Keep going.
I've got 3 here. Housing assistance policy. So this is basically taking account, again, best practice across the 3 locality teams. And it delivers what's called a mandatory disabled facilities grant, or currently known as a DFG. The financial assistance can take the form of up to £30,000 grant or loan, or there are a number of other areas, such as up to 10k for hospital discharge, up to 10k for disabled resettlement, 10k for palliative support, which is not repayable, 5k for dementia and long-term cognitive impairment, and 10k for special purposes such as wiring, damp proofing, and the like. Just again, to put it in perspective, this is all allocated through something called the Better Care Fund, which is a programme that spans both the NHS and local government to seek to join up health care and improve the lives of those individuals, and also to support moving out of the hospital environment as quick as possible, therefore making best value in terms of money. Data used that I've been given is the Better Care Fund allocation for MBC is 1.5 million, DDC nearly 450 grand, and SNC very similar. So that's basically about that on that one, I think. There is an appeal process, which, as you would expect for this type of policy, is quite comprehensive, and appeals are held quite frequently. Any questions on that one?
No questions that I can see, so move on to the allocations policy, the position statement.
Yeah, okay, so this one's slightly different because it is to report and note only, so no decision is required. At the moment, there is a lot of variation in the 3 schemes, and so in essence, the only change that's going to occur now is that relating to homeless households. So households with a general housing need will need to demonstrate a local connection to the former sovereign district borough area. But with the homeless aspect, they will be able to apply across the board. The household will be permitted to join any of all 3 of the housing registers operating within that district. The band in which, because there are obviously bands, in which the homeless applicant is placed will be determined by the housing allocation scheme that is operating in the particular area, i.e. MBC, SNC, DDC. But just to put it in perspective, many applicants will still only want to apply for the social housing in their particular locality because of networks, etc. However, they will have the option to exercise that choice. So this is a mandatory policy and will be operational from the 1st of April.
Thank you for that. Any questions?
I can give
Joe
stats
Barrett,
if you want.
Joe Barrett, have you anything to add on these? No?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay.
I mean, if you'd like to know, just in terms of context, homeless, SNC 568, DDC 502, and MBC 1,820 as of the third quarter of 2021. 2020, sorry, not 21.
Okay.
2020.
Thank you, Lizzie. Are there any other questions on any of these policies, particularly the how? So we shall. I move that the Shadow Executive reviews and agrees the adoption of the policy documents as set out in the appendices. That is the draft waste management policy, the enforcement policy, the private sector housing enforcement policy, the private sector housing assistance policy, and the housing allocations policy position statement. Are we all agreed? Are there any against? That is carried. Thank you. So item 9, emergency critical incident plan. It has been circulated. Kerry, have you anything
Yes,
to add?
Chair, I can just introduce that. So the critical incident or emergency plan, whichever title you give it, is required under the Civil Contingencies Act to set out the statutory duties that fall to local authorities as a Category 1 responder under that Act. And so the plan has been pulled together through the Future Northampton programme, the emergency planning workstream, using all the existing emergency plans that were in the Sovereign Councils to try to get us to a policy statement and a plan for day one. And so it sets out the details that we're required to cover under the statutory duty around command and control, and how the plan is activated and who can make the decisions around activation and escalation, roles and responsibilities. And it goes into more detail around this sort of joint emergency planning and response arrangements that are done on a multi-agency footing as well. So in terms of the plan itself, it is, I don't know how familiar people are, but it is what you would expect to see in an emergency plan. Just to say that as the emergency planning function is being hosted by Northants for a year whilst we continue to manage the COVID response, we need to make sure, or we need to make sure that everybody's comfortable that this plan does meet the requirements of West Northants. And I just wanted to identify a couple of the risk issues that had been put in the accompanying report, some of which we've started to address already. So one is about the ability to respond to an incident, and we've obviously tested a lot of that in anger over the last year, and I think we've both learned a lot, but also proven that that the county hasn't been found wanting. I think we've responded very well to the COVID response, but in terms of making sure that we can respond to an incident after the 1st of April, plans are in place to ensure that the duty emergency planning officer function is delivered by Northants to West Northants as part of the hosting arrangement, that the gold rotas are in place. So the leadership team, so the executive directors have been or are being trained, if they haven't been already, around their gold functions, and all the assistant directors will be on the silver rota. So there will be the ability to provide that command and control from day one, because that was a slight worry. And then just in terms of the work that has to come after the approval of the plan and after day one, it is obviously about how we prioritise the emergency planning work for West Northants, and that is aligned, or needs to be aligned, to what we're doing around a review of the COVID programme. So once the COVID programme has been reviewed, it will become a bit more clearer about what resources and capacity there is available to focus on other emergency planning priorities, both through the local resilience forum risk and community risk assessment that is done, but also from one that West Northampton no doubt will want to do under the assistant directors responsible for emergency planning within the authority. So happy to take any questions on that, Chair.
Richard.
Yeah, thank you. You know, if anyone doubted Northamptonshire's ability to set up a critical incident, emergency plan, major incident structure, well, for the past year, they've done an excellent job. I've been particularly impressed, not only with the sort of standard gold, silver, bronze, you know, strategic operational sort of structure, but also the cell work they've done in having different cells to deal with different elements, then feeding into that gold command, ensuring that everything is coordinated through one singer, one song. And I know that was led by public health. So absolutely excellent. And what's also very good, Chair, is that I think it was at December time we had the floods as well. So not only whilst we were dealing with this major critical incident of COVID, we have been able to respond to other major incidents at the same time, which shows a great deal of resilience. So I'm really satisfied that we have not only the plan but the experience to deliver this. My only observations as I was going through there was, first of all, the massive debrief that we're going to need to have once we come out of the emergency measures and the major incident for COVID. We need to have that structured debrief to making sure then that informs our future plans. And the other one, Chair, is test and exercise. You know, that is so critical. We might now go for a number of years where nothing happens, and then we set into a state of complacency. We start not spending money because we think we can get away with it, and then we end up catching a cold. So, you know, test and exercise needs to be implanted, and that's something I think we can develop going forward to ensure that whether we're dealing with COVID or not, we are still testing and exercising for other major incidents that could occur. Are we prepared? Have we got the structures in place? Do we know who to ring? Are the partner agencies all signed up to it? And if we have something in the West, do we get the service we need in a timely way? So the plan's right. It's just making sure that as we go into the new authority, we ensure that we dot any I's, cross any T's that need to be done to ensure we're safe in the short term, and then develop a more sophisticated plan going forward.
Thank you, Richard. I'd say you're our acknowledged expert in these matters, so if you're happy, we can take some reassurance from that also. I did read, I'm sure within those policies, we have to do a test within, is it within 12 months, or is it every 12 months?
I think
they talk about planning.
I don't know what legislation, but we have in here at least once a year. And I've already had a conversation on the phone today about that. And with Kerry, and it's going to have to be more than that. If we've got to make sure that we are testing and exercising a number of major incidents, they're not just all the same, are they? And they don't require all the same partner agencies. So have we got things in place? And that will be developed, Chair, as we then begin the new authority as a priority, really, because those incidents can occur at any time and hit any community, and we need to be prepared. I don't know whether Kerry can follow up on I don't know what the statute says about exercising and testing. I thought that was just something that we did with our emergency planning.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure whether it sets out how regularly they need to be tested. I know from working in the county council and other authorities, if it's not done with some frequency, then normally it gets picked up by the audit process anyway. So it is good practice to be testing it or have a rolling plan to test the overarching plan, but then the overarching plan can be tested by testing component parts within that, or particular plans that relate to particular scenarios. So yes, the sort of normal testing and exercising regime has been a bit disrupted this year, but we have still tested things in anger, but we do need to put a more routine BAU testing and exercising program back in place as soon as we're able.
And Chair, can I just add, I think that those community that are listening into this broadcast should be reassured. You know, Kerry's quite right. We have tested these plans in anger whilst in COVID, you know, and they have been operated well. We learn a lot every time you deploy these type of things. So I'm not concerned. We will respond. The community can be reassured of that. I'm talking about making a more sophisticated plan and getting these test and exercise regimes in place. But when we get a little quieter, you know, to ensure that we're always testing ourselves, making sure we're fit.
Yes. We will get back to normal one day.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments? None that I can see. So it's recommended that the Shadow Executive approve the emergency plan, critical incident plan for West Northamptonshire, and the officers delegated to declare an emergency critical incident. I suspect that should also have when appropriate. Are we agreed? Any against? That is carried, thank you. So we move on to item 10, business continuity.
Yes,
and another one that's been tested in anger. Kerry?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is in a similar vein. It's in relation to the local authority statutory duty under the Civil Contingencies Act to set out business continuity arrangements. So this is definitely sort of part A of a two-parter. So this has put in place a fairly well detailed and set out business continuity policy that we know meets the industry standards for business continuity, but it is, as I say, part of the story, because actually what makes business continuity work in practice is having the business continuity plans at a service level that sit behind or underneath the policy. Now, a number of the services and through the sovereign authorities will have those, but obviously there is a piece of work to be done to review and refresh those to make sure they're all fit for purpose. That doesn't mean to say that in the event of an incident that we won't be able to restore services quickly and do what we need to do, as we've proven that in the last year. But it's just to acknowledge there's further work to be done. But I would say that there has been some work done in the development of this policy through the leadership team to set out the sort of vision statement around business continuity, but also that to set out for this policy to be ready for day one, those critical services that the leadership team feel would need to be given priority in terms of that restore of services and the business continuity planning. So that is there, that bit's been done. It's just the detail that sits behind it that's going to need more work on day two. So happy to take any questions.
Richard?
Thank you, Chair. The biggest test for this is for me is when it's when the IT systems fail, and what the conversations I've had today is the reassurance that we need as an executive and the public need is that if the IT system fail, I know there are backup systems, but depending on whether it's a cyber attack or whether we lose the cloud, I don't know whether that's possible, but can we still look after children? Can we still look after and provide services for vulnerable adults? You know, can we do the critical public services that keep our community safe? And that is the test and exercise we need to be reassured at, that if all the systems fail, that we still have records and the ability to look after the most vulnerable in our community in the short term and possibly medium term, whilst the problems are being fixed. You know, there are other functions we do, like filling in roads, of course, and picking up rubbish, and hopefully that we can continue these things if there was a massive loss of data that occurs. So for me, is again, it's an exercise and test, and we will need from an officer at some stage the reassurance to know that those vital services and the vulnerable will continue to be cared for should we have a massive loss of IT functionality in the short to medium term. I'm not quite sure we've got that at the moment, if I'm honest, but that is something that we have a plan. It'd be nice to see it tested and exercised as soon as we're in positions to do so, Chair.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. But I do think as well, as to say, it's as soon as we get back to that normal. Kerry, can you give Richard a simple yes, no?
Yes, I mean, I completely agree. We've had a conversation that the devil is in the detail. I mean, I know that there's probably other people on the call more equipped for me to answer the question about business continuity for adults and children's services, because I know that you know, that those business continuity plans that are in place are there now, and there would be an ability to continue to deliver services. But I do take the point that probably some further reassurance is required around that.
Fiona, do you want to say anything on the children's side? Or I know Colin Foster's on the call. It might be a bit much just to ask him on the spot to come in, but if you want to, Colin, just raise your hand. Anna?
Yeah, just to say, and I think I've mentioned this before, so as of the 1st of April, obviously the adult system, as Jane has reported, goes live on Eclipse. One of the reasons that we decided to invest in Eclipse is it is a system that's in the cloud and therefore fully replicated, fully backed up, and moves us away for the first time to having a system that would rely on a much slower recovery. And that's exactly why we moved it, because this is a critical service. This covers adults and children's, and also make sure, you know, that we've got that ability. So I think you can be reassured from an adults and children's perspective, even on the go live, just as a sort of another reassurance. And I think you've asked me this before, Councillor Auger, about you know, manual backups and things. So even when we go live on the system, for example, adults will be taking paper copies, which it does every weekend, of all the rotas, of all the staff calls that have got to be made and all the relevant lists. And we do that as standard practice, just should the system not come up and we need to know for the next 2 weeks who we need to visit. So there are those sort of backups there, but actually the move and the go live from 1st of April will provide massive reassurance for us in terms of that recovery, and also for children's going forward.
Chair, can I just ask a question of Anna, please, on that? Anna, once the new system is up and running and working effectively, how will we retain that organisational memory on making sure that we have the ability to respond should the IT fail? In other words, will we always keep those written records as a matter of course, or once the systems are up and running, that is then redundant and only brought in should we need it? I'm just wondering, you know, I accept your reassurance about the cloud and that. My concern is what's the worst possible thing that could happen? The worst possible thing is we lose all data, we lose all IT, and we still need to function for a couple of days. So it's just a reassurance that we will always have that backup system there and tested and exercised so we can get straight into it should the worst occur.
So any system that we've got, certainly in adults, that is not in the cloud, we would automatically do that. And some of our rostering systems aren't yet on there, but are moving there too as well. And so we do that. The whole point of the cloud, though, is that you get, without getting too technical, constant replication between 2 data centers. Whereas what we've got now is a system that's in 1 data center, and you would have to stand up new servers, build them, and then copy over data that you'd taken at a certain point if you wanted to resurrect a system, and that takes time, weeks often, to be able to do that, several weeks. The whole point of the cloud point is you have a live, constant double database all the time. So actually, from the main systems point of view, we will be about as robust as you can get in terms of recovery of systems. Even if you lost a data center, you would not lose the system and the data. But for those smaller systems that we've got, as I said, like rotors and things like that, we always take a manual backup. And that just reassures us, as I said, that until such time as we've got that same resilience, we've always got a plan B, and that would give us time to resurrect from backup data and build back the systems.
So you're telling me that we will, once the systems are up and running, we will never ever lose all our data ever, under any circumstances? That sounds like the Titanic. That's my only worry, a little bit.
Yeah.
So is that what the IT view is? Is that we would never ever lose it completely?
Well, even if you think back, Councillor Auger, to, I don't know if you remember, years and years ago, a big data centre burned down, didn't it, by the side of the railway over in, I'm just trying to think where it was now, Hatfield, I think it was. And that was a situation where they had lots and lots of systems, but in one data centre. And the point was, that is it. They took a data backup every day, as I said. But if you had a disaster recovery situation, you rebuild servers and then you load that data. It does take weeks and weeks. The cloud gives the advantage to say of this constant replication. So even if you lost one data center, you'd have another one stand up, or you'd have other servers stood up automatic with a full replica of all your data, which would allow you then to run that and then replicate it again. So you're always backing it up in a way that should ensure that you don't end up, you'd have to lose 2 data centers in completely different geographies, which seems unlikely, at the same time to not have the resilience of the information available.
I think I'll leave it there, Chair. It's probably best taking this for another sort of sit down debate, because my head's going a bit. But yeah, all I can reassure you and the cabinet and the people is that we will be making sure we have those procedures in place to ensure that people are looked after should anything occur.
Councillor McCord appears to have dropped out of the meeting. I'm just readmitting him from the waiting room now.
I didn't realise I was that boring.
Sorry, Richard, just as you said, what happens if you lose your connection? I lost my connection.
Oh dear, I'm a little bit more worried now, Ian.
I'd had to come back on my backup 4G connection. So I don't know.
Chair, would you like me to come in on the children's point?
Sorry, yes, thank you, Colin. For those that don't know, Colin is the Chief Executive of the Children's Trust. So if there is a point on the Children's Trust, and if you don't have the answers to hand, Colin, feel free to write to members after.
Of course, Chair. Of course, I just want to reassure that the plans under NCC were for the Children's Social Care Early Help function to continue the rollout of Eclipse after the go live of the adult system. We're committed to continuing that rollout. It could take approximately 13-16 months to roll out a system as it did with adults. So the forecasted go live date is June 2022. Work is well underway with that, and of course, as Anna rightly said, and Councillor Auger said, the data migration is the biggest issue, and it takes a long time. So the work has started already in that implementation. So just to reassure, that's where we're at, and confident that'll happen.
Thank you. So, I don't see any other hands up. So I shall move that the Shadow Executive approve the West Northamptonshire Council Business Continuity Management Policy and Strategy document as provided in Appendix A, and note the areas within the policy that require further action and incorporation post-vote vesting day. Are we all agreed? Any against? That is carried. Thank you. We shall move on to item 11. Inter-authority agreements. As a rule, I think members shouldn't say too much in any document that begins with the word whereas. Kathy, are you going to tell us about all documents that begin with the word whereas?
I'll try to avoid it, thanks. Okay, so this report follows on from the report that was presented to the February meeting of the Shadow Executive, which sets out the broad legal framework for the arrangements for shared services and to give effect to the blueprint. This report seeks approval for the detailed overarching agreement, the governance arrangements, and the joint committee and the format of the service schedules, which, as you've heard, are being prepared at the moment, and we are 95% there in relation to those that we require for day one. The attention subject to your decision this evening is that the suite of agreements will be signed off and that the schedules will be in operation. A delegated power is required to finalise the agreements and complete that final 5%. Thank you, Chair.
Any comments? I think we've had 2 or 3 iterations and drafts of these as they've been developed, so hopefully most people are happy with where we're at on them. I know there's many words in them, but they have been gone through. So are we happy with these? I don't see any people asking questions. So the recommendation then is to approve the inter-authority administrative agreement attached in Appendix A and delegate the authority to the Chief Executive to make the necessary amendments, finalise and execute the agreement prior to the 31st of March 21. Approve the governance agreements as attached in Appendix B, and again delegate to the Chief Executive to make any necessary amendments. Part C, note the draft service schedules at Appendix C and approve the format of the schedules. And D, delegate authority to the Chief Executive to finalise those service schedules before the 31st. I presume that should be the 31st of March 2021, like the others. Service schedules. It just says 31st in the recommendation, but am I right to append the words March 21 on there, Catherine?
You are indeed, yes.
Yeah, fine. Thank you. It just looks like a typo. So are we agreed? Any against? If you're against, we won't be safe with legal, so bear that in mind. So thank you. Item 12, council-owned companies, has been withdrawn. So we move on to items 13, Children's Trust Business Plan. Kathy or Fiona, who's going to start? And where's Colin going? Because no doubt he'll want to come back in. So Kathy, Fiona?
I think Kathy is doing this on my...
Okay.
Yes, really. This is to present the business trust, the trust business plan. I will hand you over to Colin to discuss some of the areas. This is to seek members' approval for the plan as set out. The plan provides an overview of the trust responsibilities, the vision and the priorities. And it's been developed in consultation with children and young people, partners, council delegates, and lead members of the Department of Education. It has also been seen by MP responsible for the trust development and agreed. It has been part of the development of the trust and the requirements that there is a business plan and that it is agreed by all. And it sets out the improvement journey and the areas that the improvements need to be managed and the priorities around leadership, recruit and retain a workforce, to develop the relationship-based practice, quality assurance of the services that are provided, to work across the partnership and to manage resources effectively and robustly. This is a 1-year business plan and it will be developed into a 3-year business plan for consideration later in 2021. I'd like to hand over to Colin because I'm sure that he will have things to say about the business plan.
Thank you, Kathy. And there's a presentation on screen at the moment. Just to say, just to echo what Kathy said, really, the reason this is a 1-year business plan is because that was an agreement between NCC and the DFE that there was a 1-year business plan required. So as you would expect, we're obviously doing a lot of thinking about a 3-year business plan, and a lot of the facets of this plan will form that. So just want to reassure that there is the long-term strategic thinking going on, as well as the need to produce the 1-year business plan. This did, as Kathy said, did go in front of Minister Ford, who's the Minister for Children, and yeah, that it's been approved by the DFE. And in fact, I'm pleased to say that a lot of people have worked on this. So this, you know, it's a wholly owned document with partners, with children, young people, with families, with lead members, trust board, and senior officers across the council. And so with all that effort that's gone into it, it was really nice for the Department for Education to say, as a Children's Trust business plan, it's the best one they've seen, which was really nice to hear, and I think it's credit to everybody involved. So I'll just do a quick trot through these slides. Everybody's got a full copy in the papers. The first slide just simply shows, obviously that box on the left will change to, on the 1st of April, West Northamptonshire Council and North Northamptonshire Councils, and that gives an idea of an overview of how the relationship between Northamptonshire Children's Trust and the councils work. The Children's Trust is wholly owned by West Northamptonshire and North Northamptonshire Councils, so it's it's really important that we work together to improve outcomes for children. We're committed to do that with the councils as our owners and our partners and our corporate parents. And for corporate parents, there's lots of detail in the business plan itself around our joint responsibility for supporting children and young people who are in the care of the council and indeed care leavers. So thank you. Over to the next slide. That's the logo. Now the great thing about the logo is this was actually designed by young people. So there was designers on Zoom and a group of young people, and they were kind of designing it in the moment. So they've come up with something that is that's meaningful and that works from children's perspective, children and young people. So it's quite nice in its simplicity and a message there. Children, young people, and families at the heart of all we do. So over to the next slide. And that's how it fits into our strategic framework. So the vision is children, young people, and families at the heart of all we do in every action we take and every decision we make. Also working with the group of children, young people who are in care. We said, what do you want us to commit to you? And they came up with this, the iterative process. And it had lots of different versions, but this is where they settled. Is that we want us to commit to them that what we do today affects your tomorrow. We promise to walk side by side with you, and that's how we work with children, young people, and families. Our outcomes framework is underneath, so that's quite self-explanatory. That within each of those 4 outcomes, there's areas, performance indicators, etc., that we ensure we deliver, and our conditions for success at the bottom. That's how our workforce operates. One of our key priorities is to recruit, retain our workforce, and that's what that's all about, and just effectively how the system works together. So on the next slide, just to reiterate that commitment to children and young people that I mentioned earlier. It's really important to everybody across the trust, and I do briefing sessions with staff, and I'm pleased to say I've done 2 blocks of briefings now, and each of those have been attended by over 700 staff, who've been heavily involved in the development of this. So I'm quite pleased about that. Over to the next slide. I'm not going to read out the slide. This is in the business plan itself, but it's just important to note that the comments from children and young people about why we do what we do. For example, many of us have had a hard time with the one life we have, and we just want someone to help us through, and that really is our job on behalf of everybody on the call and to support children and young people. So. And the ask at the bottom of that slide is be the best corporate parent you can be, and there will be workshops as we go on. Kathy and I will be doing around what corporate parenting is and how we can all support each other and support young people. So, okay, so next slide. So this next slide is this is quite a powerful slide, and this is in the business plan. This was written by a young person who's been in care since the age of 9, who's now 17 and a half. And with their permission, it's published in the business plan. And as you would expect, because this is a piece of their original work, there's obviously been a payment for that work as well, because this is a very powerful poem. I'll just leave it there for a second for people to read. I have to say, every time I put that poem on the screen, I take the time to read it myself, because if there's ever a reminder of why we do what we do, that's it. So if you think about this 17-and-a-half-year-old young person who's worked with their social worker, who's worked with their support worker to unpick how they feel, because they could not have written this age 9, of course, age and stage. So the fact that they're able to express how they feel, I think, is incredibly powerful, and that's an example of really good work. On to the next slide. And these are our values. I won't read them all out. You can read them on the screen, but this is what you'd expect, you know. And I think if we operate together as a system across West Northamptonshire Council, North Northamptonshire Council, and the Children's Trust, and we communicate well and we act with respect, kindness, and compassion to support each other to get the best solution, then I really do think all the conditions are right to create, you know, one of the best services for children in the country. And I'm very passionate about achieving that. And I'm committed to helping us all deliver that in a child-focused way. So, thank you. Just on that, the last one, and this links to this priority of effective leadership. I have a simple ask to all the workforce within the Children's Trust, and that's that do the best job of your life every single day. And you know, I say that because I promise I will as well, and do my best to do that. Just to reassure colleagues that you know, I came into this role. I'm local. I live just down the road in north of Bedfordshire. So you know, this is a local role for me, and I don't intend moving on anytime soon. Just want to do the best job possible, really, to help improve things for children. So there are our priorities. Moving on to the next slide. That's a brief overview. That's in the slide pack of our senior management structure. So, and just pop on to the last slide there. You know, we do what we do because it matters, and we want to do it with West Northamptonshire Council and with North Northamptonshire Council, and I'm looking forward to working with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin, and I think that will be reciprocated, certainly from my point of view. We're looking forward to working with you, and you know, as a standing invitation, if you think there's anything that you need to bring to the attention of us, the executive, feel free to pop along to any of our meetings and let us know. You know, we need to work together as partners, because the more successful you are, the more successful the councils will be, and vice versa. So
thank you, Chair.
It's not
on
so
the
far
call,
as I'm concerned, and us and them. We're all us, and we're all got one ambition.
Thank you, Chair. On the call with me is there's Julian Worcester, who's the chair of Northamptonshire Children's Trust. There's Andrew Tagg, who's our Director of Finance and Resources, and Cornelia Andrica, who's our Director of Children's Social Care. So happy to take any questions.
Okay. Well, before I bring in Cabinet colleagues, I see Danielle had her hand up, and then I'll bring in Cabinet colleagues after that.
Thank you, and thank you very much for your report and your presentation. You know, the work that you're doing is about the most important work in the authority or the authorities, and we're all really, really passionate about it, and we want it to succeed. But I've got a number of questions.
Of course.
The leadership of the children's services in our new arrangement seems extremely top-heavy to me. I'm bothered about that. I'm bothered about it because of the impact it has on the staffing structure and on the resources available for frontline work. So I just want to leave that with you for a minute. I'm wondering if, because of COVID, because of the situation we're in, if you have any ideas. You know, I know you haven't got a crystal ball, but you must see a pattern emerging of need in terms of where we're going. Are numbers of children coming into care going down, or are they going up? Are we expecting, you know, a big spike when the children go back to school? What is happening there? Do you mind if I just ask all the questions, or do you want me to stop and answer them?
I don't mind. Which would work best for you? I can answer those two questions now, if that would help. Or
that'd be great. And then I've got another couple. Is that all right?
Sure. So as it stands, as of today, across Northamptonshire, there are 1,139 children in care, and that number has remained reasonably static for a number of months now. It's not necessarily the numbers of children in care that will increase, that we're expecting to increase immediately when schools go back. It's more likely to be the numbers of contacts and referrals. So what we'd be expecting, now schools have returned, there are approximately 3,500 contacts per month. Approximately 1,000 of those will become referrals. That means there's a more in-depth look at those. and approximately 750 of those will become assessments, and assessments have to be conducted within 45 days. That's a statutory timescale. And so, yes, we are expecting an increase in our current numbers, but all that work that goes on doesn't automatically mean all those children will come into care. At any one point in time, there's over 6,000, almost 7,000 cases within the system, all being worked through, through early help and social work, etc. And the purpose of a lot of that work is to support families to stay together where it's safe to do so. So the bias isn't towards moving children into care. The bias is towards doing all we can to support families to stay together with children who do not have to come into care. Whenever I meet children that have come into care, the thing they remember most, regardless of what horrible things may have happened to them, is that moment that family bond was broken when they're taken into care. So it's incumbent on us to do all we can to enable families to stay together. In terms of the leadership of the Children's Trust, a lot of the structures were developed in partnership with appropriate members, senior officers at Northamptonshire County Council, and those who joined Western North Northamptonshire. So, when I look at the numbers, the leadership structure is, percentage-wise, is about right. Leadership is just under 10% of the total workforce. So that is there or thereabouts, right? But what I can say in terms of cost, I think the point of cost is the critical point that you make. Now, for a long time in Northamptonshire, there's some colleagues on the call that were, appointed permanently in Northamptonshire several months ago, over a year ago actually. But there's for many years there hasn't been a permanent leadership team. So therefore, what happens is you get interim people in, and interim people cost about 30% more than permanents. So, for example, an interim me would cost a lot more than me, if you see what I mean. Therefore, what I'm pleased to say is that now all of our leadership team are permanent. I've been working hard over the last few months to get those permanent appointments in. The final person comes into post on the 5th of April, and that we will have a full permanent leader. So immediately, in terms of cost, that reduced the cost of the leadership team by 30%. If you look at what it could be. So, and believe me, that priority around robust and effective resource management is something we take incredibly seriously. Realise the challenges that have been here in the past, and I think the arrangements that have been made in terms of the finances with the trust, etc., do feel appropriate. And the numbers of social workers, so the frontline practice, it feels that the number of heads are about right. Obviously depending on demand, that can fluctuate, but caseloads are coming under control now, an average of 20, which is very, very pleasing to see. And so it makes for, at the moment, that those resource levels seem to be about right. And obviously we keep that under review. A number of us, certainly Cornelia and I, get daily updates on numbers and figures. And to do this job, as much as you have to care about supporting children and young people, you also have to really know and understand your data, and you have to be really good at the financial management side of it. And so, I'm pretty confident that we're on that.
Lovely,
and of course, if there's any concerns, we'd report that straight away. This is about a transparent relationship. It's not about, we all want the best for the communities, don't we? And that's exactly where we're at.
Thank you, Colin.
Sorry.
Carry on.
I raised a question, Chair, earlier on about data management and the integration of data and the need to have a holistic view of our families and our children, and the danger of having a fragmented array of data sets which are hard to pull together. And I'm really, really worried about that. I've read the reports really carefully, and it seems to me we've got a plethora of data lodged with different companies using different software, and it worries me. I mean, is there a danger there that we're going to lose our grip on what's going on with an individual child, but also with families across the piece?
Chair, did you want me to?
Yeah, Karen.
Okay. Yeah, of course. And I think the foresight of the council to invest in the Eclipse programme is incredibly helpful, because the work and the learning has been done implementing the adult system, and so those systems will be hosted on the same server. So and of course we have regular, I met with Stuart Lackenby the other day. Actually, we were having a discussion and about how we will be pulling together our leadership team so we can track families through the system, etc. So you're right. If a system doesn't work effectively, then those kind of relationships break down. But there's what I've found here. This is month 4 for me, so just about getting to know the infrastructure, etc. And I think there is a really strong partnership with the police and health, and I think the partnership between children's and adult services is too. So I'm reasonably confident. I think the conditions are there to have an effective overview of families in the way you say, and I agree with you.
And with schools, though, I mean, that's going to be a big issue, isn't it?
Certainly, with Cathy as the Director of Children's Services, with Accountability for Education Standards, we're working together. I've met a few schools already. Really want to go to some of the meetings that Cathy holds with all head teachers, so we can work together in that space to engage with schools. Because if you think about it, if you look at sort of the social care system as a triangle, and at the very top of the triangle is the number of children that come into care. The bottom bit of that triangle, where most children are, is school. That's the so that partnership with schools is of critical importance, and the sort of early help and intervention arrangements we have, if they work well with schools, then the number of referrals that come in lessen, and therefore the demand on the system lessens, and therefore the better social work can happen with children and families that need it most. And what's good about that is that the earlier we intervene in partnership with schools, then the better we are to enable families to work through any of the issues they have. And sometimes what happens when a system isn't working so well is perhaps a lot of contacts come into what we call the front door in the multi-agency support hub, which is with the police and health. And the referrals will come in because sometimes partners may feel, well, there's nothing else to do, we have to put the referral in. But if you've got effective networks around the universal spaces like school, nurseries, etc., that helps the system work better, because then no one's anxious. Well, if someone's got a concern about a family, you're going to be worried. That's natural as a professional, and I'd be worried if they weren't worried, if you see what I mean. But it's really important that relationship works, so the early intervention can happen then at that first point of worry, as opposed to waiting until it escalates and then coming into the front door. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And my last question, I've got loads of questions, but I'll make this the last one. I've had a concern for a number of years about our young care leavers before they've become care leavers, going into supported housing with a huge variety of providers of mixed quality, in my experience. I'm just wondering if you've got plans to change that and develop a supported lodging service.
I'm going to bring Cornelia in a moment, but what I'd say as a headline is that there's a national challenge around accommodation for young people over 16. You may have seen some of that in the news recently over the last year or so, and also care leavers. Now, what's important for us as a system is that we make sure that the placements where we place children meet their needs, and support the accommodation we support care leavers to go to meets their needs, and that's our job. Now, what we can't control is the marketplace, which covers the national picture. We can control what we do with children that we're sighted on. So, Cornelia, would you like to add to that?
Good evening. Just to reassure that we do have a framework, and all the providers are actually checked, and visited, and looked into, and we make absolutely sure that any placement, that is made, or any arrangement that is made for our care leavers is suitable and meets their needs. Also to say, that we have recently had the Ofsted, looking at our children in care, and type of arrangements that are used at this type of accommodation for over 16 years of age. And they have been satisfied, with what they found. So there is still a lot to do, because obviously we need more in terms of the provision, so that it's local and meets the needs of the young people. But we scrutinize, any arrangement that is being made, with visits and a very robust process, and all the providers are actually checked and approved. Just to provide that reassurance.
Okay, thank you for that, Cornelia. I'm just very conscious of the time. It's 5 minutes to 8 according to my clock here. Colleagues may want to do the 8 o'clock mark of respect, and if that is the case, I'm happy to take sort of one quick question, then have a quick adjournment, and come back to allow people to get to their front door for if they wish to take part in that. So, Fiona, do you want to say something quickly?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say that this particular business case that we saw before us, the reason that the Department of Education thought it was one of the best, well, I think they said it was the best one they'd ever seen, was really to put forward the fact that although it talks about the budgets and how they are going to be spent and how various aspects are going to be saved, etc., etc., 50% of the business case, excuse me, talks about children. And I think that we're actually in a new phase now. And I know that you as leader have said that you want us to be the best council for looking after children. And I think this is really the start of that this business case actually shows children at the front. And I know one of Colin's favourite things is saying children at the heart of everything we do. And I've obviously known him for 3 or 4 months now, and I know that he says that on a regular basis. So it's kind of imprinted in my mind too. But what I also wanted to cover was about the senior leadership. We have been inadequate in children's services in Northamptonshire for far too long. And we need good, permanent senior leadership in order to make sure that we are lifted out of that and move forward to be good in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. So it's now 19:57. So can I suggest that we take a quick adjournment and we pick this up, I'd say 8:10, which will allow people, I'm also conscious of the fact we've been going at this for almost 2 hours, so people can have a comfort break, grab a mug of coffee to sustain us to the end, and come back, say, at 8:10. Are we happy with that?
Could everyone turn their cameras off then, please, in that case? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm about to have on. All right. Everyone back. Is everyone back? Are we continuing to broadcast, or Paul?
Yeah, Chair, we are live. Ready when you are. I think.
You ready? Well, welcome back, and thank you for that. So, Richard has been extremely patient. Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And it's a very quick one, Colin. Thank you for being with us this evening, and congratulations on the business plan. But both you and me know it's not business plans or starters or leaders that actually is going to do any good at all. And all the serious case reviews I'm aware of, the themes are poor partnership work at the coalface, lack of supervision, heavy caseloads. You know, this is when, and sometimes it's just down to poor quality of the individual working on that case. Maybe the case is too complicated for them. Are you happy that those individuals, that staff that are going to have to do this most difficult of work, got the right support, the right training, the right partnerships, that we will not be, you know, in a few months or years' time, be the subjects of another serious case review?
Thank you, Councillor. I think you're absolutely right. And if you hear one of my staff briefings, that's exactly what I say. It's that, you know, those strategies and things shouldn't sit on a shelf and gather dust. It's about how we live them, how we breathe them, and how we operate. I've been struck by the number of local frontline staff that there are, who've been here for a long time, who deliver some good work. What's been important, the improvement journey that was kicked off by Kathy and Cornelia before the trust started, has been that that work on the basics with people at the front line, and also, you know, making it safe to practice so they can sort of reflect and understand what's gone on and learn. And I'm confident in that process that's been put in place, and also that the development things that we've got coming up, in, you know, like a learning platform where you can reflect and learn on things, quality assurance board where we can take learning onto the front line will all help. Can I sit here and say there will not be a serious case review in Northamptonshire? I can't say that because I don't think any leader of children's services, children's social care can say that. What's important is that we do everything we can to ensure that we're keeping children safe. And with the systems we have in place, I'm confident that we have sufficient oversight to do that. And you mentioned the partnership working, and I have to say, before I came, I was a bit concerned about what the level of partnership working would be, given some of the things I'd seen in the past. And you know, I've experienced a positive partnership in the safeguarding board with, it's chaired by Health. The police attend there regularly. Children's Trust attend. Kathy and Children's Services attend from the council. So the strategic partnership is there. We had a particularly challenging case a few weeks ago, and I was pleased that you know, the police and myself and Cornelia were able to have that conversation reasonably quickly to reflect on what happened and to deal with the issue. So as we are completely accessible, as I believe our partners are, that if something happens, we can pick up the phone and address it quickly. Where partnerships tend to fail is when it reverts into blame, and everyone's blaming each other rather than actually picking up the issue that's live in the moment. And I'm confident we have those arrangements in place. So I hope that helps. It's such a challenging world we work in. I don't want to give any big, broad guarantees. What I can tell you is every single day, the practitioners on the ground will do the best job of their lives, and to make a difference, and that's the best we can do. And as we go improving things, improving the training, improving the development, things will get better. And we've got to accept the low starting point of Northamptonshire and the inadequacy, and it's about building the system to make. It's not just making a change to get through Ofsted. Inspectorates can come and go. It's making a change that's sustainable for children. That's what's important.
Thank you, Colin. Look, we all appreciate how difficult some of these cases are, but we wish you the very best of luck. And as the leader has said, we're here to support you and to do and to support you and your organisation in ensuring we keep children safe in West Northamptonshire.
Angela, quick question.
Really quick question. Thank you very much, Chair. One of the other key issues that has been highlighted over the last few years has been the number and duration of unregulated placements. Certainly, I sit on the foster panel, and we've had some incredibly long ones that have come through of late, and I just wondered how you felt the direction of travel was going.
Of course, I'll hand over to Cornelia in a moment, who knows got a lot of the detail here. But just when you say in the fostering panel you've had ones that have been running for a long time, what can I just understand what that means? Sorry.
They've actually been unregulated for tens of weeks, sometimes months and months before becoming regulated through coming to panel.
Okay, I know Cornelia's got some data on this, but just to reassure that any placements that we do engage in, there isn't routine that they're unregulated placements. From time to time, if there's an emergency, there may be a need for a placement, and even if it's unregulated, it doesn't mean there isn't any support in there. It just means that it isn't eligible for registration from the regulator. So, for example, at the time of the Ofsted inspection, I think there were 2 very short-term cases. So it's not. There may have been issues in the past. I can assure you, it's one of the first things I looked at coming into post, and it's not endemic practice here. But I'll hand over to Cornelia, who's got a lot more detail.
Was that the thing that was recently, there was a change in the law, either just made or just about to come?
Yes, absolutely, Councillor, you're absolutely right. There is a change in law that's about to come live in September, where any unregulated placement, unregistered placement for under 16 is illegal. But it's not a problem for us, just to reassure everybody, so we have worked really, really hard to make sure that we have oversight. We have in the past, I think we had about 6 placements, between October, and December, January, February, where we had to use those unregulated arrangements for a very, very short period of time. But with very clear oversight, from the managers that, again, it's an area that was looked into by Ofsted when they came into February, and they were reassured we had 2 placements at the time, as Colin has said, when they arrived. Since then, we now have one that's about to move into a regulated provision. So it's very, very small number, kept to a minimum, being mindful at the same time, that as from September, we'll not be able to use that provision in any event. And it's been in a context of, COVID challenges, in securing placements for, last minute change in arrangements for young people, where some support has been put in place in a provision, that was not regulated. So it's absolutely something that we keep under close scrutiny, and we have no intention of using that. And it's definitely not an endemic.
Okay. Thank you, Cornelia. I'm also conscious of the fact that Julian had his hand up earlier, and he's been with us for most of this call. Julian is the chair of the Children's Trust. Julian, do you want to say anything?
No, really, thank you, Chair, for inviting me in. So I really want to thank members for their support and commitment around the Trust. Just to say, obviously, part of the function of the Trust Board, which has nominated directors from the 2 councils, is to oversee the work of the Trust, and we keep a tight management control of the Trust, and we obviously review the resources and also the management arrangements. So please be assured that we are keeping our grip on that, and certainly welcome the support from members around that. And we look forward to obviously to working with yourselves in terms of the future plans for West Northampton. So thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks, Julian. Peter Martin.
Thank you, Chair.
I'm not a member of the cabinet or the executive, and I wasn't going to speak at all tonight, but I just felt that I should say how very impressed I've been with the way Colin and Cornelia have spoken tonight, and that gives me a lot of hope that if everybody in the Children's Trust dealt with the amount of passion and goodwill that you two have shown through what you've said tonight, then I think we'll be doing very well as an authority.
Thank you, Peter. That's a nice summing up. I don't see any other hands up from any cabinet colleagues. So we shall move to the recommendation. So to approve the Children's Trust business plan. Are we all agreed? Is there anyone against? No? So can I just once again thank Cornelia, Colin, Julian. There was another person of your team whose name I've forgotten. Apologies.
Andrew, Chair, who's our Director of Finance and Resources, and just to assure everybody he's on top of things.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you all for what you're doing, and as I say, I hope that we have frequent meetings, and do feel free to, if you think that we need to know something, feel free to bring it to our attention as quickly as possible. There's no need to wait for a, shall we say, a proper cycle of something to happen. So we shall feel free to drop off or stay on. It's entirely up to you how full your evening is. We shall move on to item 14, Equalities and Diversion Inclusion Framework. My says it's Andrew, but is this you, Phil?
It is me, Chair, yes.
Okay.
We have before us this evening the outcome of the Equalities Task and Finish Group, and our work on the development of equality, diversity and inclusion policy, and an equality, diversity and inclusion strategy. These documents allow the Council to fulfil its general and specific duties as required by the Equalities Act, and prepares the Council to undertake further work after the 1st of April. Can I first of all, Chair, just thank my colleagues who worked on this group, Councillors Pinder Chowan, Daniel Cribbin, Gareth Eales and Rosie Herring. Thank them all for their input into this this outcome. And can I also in particular say a grateful thanks to Andrew Hunkin, who has been a stalwart really. Unfortunately, we had somebody come along to join us who was going to help and write the actual document, but unfortunately they couldn't in the end, and Andrew has taken absolutely everything upon himself to bring us to where we are today. So my grateful thanks to Andrew as well. The policy is a public statement that sets out the Council's commitment to advancing equality, diversity and inclusion, and includes an assurance that it will give due regard to the application of the 9 characteristics protected under the Equality Act. The strategy sets out what actions will be taken to meet that commitment. These are based on the equality framework of the for local government developed by the LGA. The strategy sets out 5 proposed equality objectives which seek to prepare a baseline in the first instance. They focus on communities, leadership, services and the workforce. The strategy also holds data sets based on the 9 protected characteristics and the population in general. It recognises that there are gaps in the data, and that one of the first tasks will be to update the information and fill in any gaps following the publication of the outcome of the census that took place the other day. And of course, the workforce isn't totally in place yet, and isn't fully established. But again, once it is, then we will have to get some baseline details on the workforce as well, so we understand that. As I say, Chair, it's a policy strategy to take us forward. More work's needed. Statistics need to be brought up to date, and I'm particularly pleased that the group at paragraph 13 of the strategy supports and indicates that the council will also support the Dying to Work campaign, something that the staff of the County Council and Borough Council have had that assurance and facility for several years now. So I'm really pleased about that. But other than that, Chair, I'm happy to propose the recommendations in the report at section 3. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before I bring in Cabinet colleagues, I see Angela has her hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points, really. One, firstly, in terms of the legislation, particularly in terms of the specific duty under the Equality Act, the requirement is not only for a strategy with objectives and your publication of data, but for those objectives to be specific and measurable, which don't appear to be within your strategy. So I wondered at what point in time was the council going to set specific and measurable objectives? I also wanted to particularly highlight the section in relation to young people. I just think COVID has really shone a spotlight on inequalities in all sense of the word, and I just wanted to highlight the issues relating to young people, with 2/3 of people who've lost their jobs in the pandemic being under 25 and 88% of them under 35. I just think for this new authority, which seeks to be the most effective council in the country, which is one of the biggest organisations in the whole of West Northampton, we have a big part to play within this. I also just wanted to highlight Northamptonshire Rights and Equality Council's 9-point plan and ask you, given that this has been the references to this have been passed within the County Council, that maybe this can be considered when you are thinking of a specific and measurable objective. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, as I say, this is the first stab, and a lot of data isn't actually available. What data there is quite old, and I think the time to start looking at objectives is when we know clearly what we're dealing with and how we can have objectives that are meaningful in light of where we actually are. So I think they will come in due course, and I'm pleased that that will be the case. Young people, I hear what the councillor says, but that is not an aspect that we've considered, I'm afraid. I understand what she's saying, but I don't know if it's something that really needs to be in the strategy or in the policy. I think we did, because Councillor Eales did come along, I think at your bequest, with regard to the plan. We did discuss that, and at this stage we haven't included it, but it was discussed. Can I just make one point? I forgot to make that in my opening point, and that's with regard to the 9 characteristics protected under the Equality Act. They're listed on page 2 of the report, 5.11 to 5.19. 5.18 says gender. Now, so the law refers to sex, but we have pursued this, and it can be either sex or gender. So I'm sure Andrew can answer that perhaps in a bit more depth than I can. But we have checked it out, and it can either be sex or gender, and it is generally accepted that these days gender is favourable to sex, so as a descriptor. So that's why it's at 5.18 is gender and not sex. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. I suspect that might have been Councillor Brown's point, but Adam?
Yes, I was just going to highlight the discrepancy between the wording used in the legislation and what appears on the report, but Councillor Lowett's explained why that is, so thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands up, so I shall move the proposition that the Shadow Executive is recommended to approve and adopt the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Policy at Appendix A for the West Northamptonshire Council, subject to any amendments requested by the Shadow Executive. Approves and adopts the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Strategy, Appendix B for West Northamptonshire Council, subject to any amendments requested. And C, delegates authority to the Director of Legal and Democratic to make any amendment requested and any other minor amendments required in consultation with the Chair of the Equalities Task and Finish Group. Are we agreed? Anyone against? Thank you. And that is delegate, Catherine, not delete. So we'll move on to item 15, which is transfer of responsibility for events and festivities to Northampton Town Council. Jonathan?
Yes, thank
Rebecca,
you.
Do you want to just...
No, thank you.
You're happy for Jonathan to crack on, Jonathan?
I'm happy for Jonathan to crack on.
Right, Jonathan.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't realise we were competing for that, but happy to give my side of it. I think what this does is it addresses anomaly. Members will be aware until recently there was no Northampton Town Council, and events in the town are extremely important to the economy of the town, things like the Christmas lights and activities, Diwalis, the band in the parks and so on. But of course, hitherto, Northampton residents have paid the Borough Council to deliver these. Now that and indeed what they are paying in the bills that are just arriving is going into the West and will cover what they would anticipate would cover the costs of events. Now that we have a town council, the proposal is that the town council takes up responsibility for delivering events, and that the money for events in the first year is handed across to the town council to do that, and that grant tapers over 3 years. The consequence being that in 3 years or more time, we will have a town council fully equipped and funded through its precept to deliver these events. But in the meantime, the funding that has transferred across with the borough's budget into the WNC budget will be used to fund those projects. So it's a straightforward arrangement. Therefore, in 4 or more years' time, all town councils across the whole West will be delivering such events, and that money won't be passing through West Northants at all. Sort of a tidy up exercise in that way. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, it's just one of support, and you know, I'm really glad that we are enhancing the roles of our town, our parish councils. They're going to be a really important part in the new unitary. I know they felt a little bit vulnerable on occasions with regard to the setup of this big, bruisey, you know, one of the, I think it's the 5th largest in the country, unitary authority. I feel they may have get left behind. This is just one way of ensuring there is that local accountability, local organisation, and that we continually work with them for them to support us and us to support them. So, yeah, very pleased to see it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And just by way of a little bit of background on this as well, I think this is the arrangement as well that was requested. Myself and Jonathan met with Councillor Birch, who's the leader, I think, of the Shadow Town Council, or if that's the right term. And she you know, suggested that the taper apply. So I'm happy to agree to that. I also think it's a basic, simple matter of fairness that the good folk of the borough have already had this charge for 340 odd £1,000 built into the borough's budgets, it's only sensible that we then say, if we as a council wish to say, which I think makes some sense, in that, if you take in South Northants, certainly in Daventry and Toaster town lights and those sort of things are the preserve of the local town councils, not the district council. Without a town council in Northampton, they have done it. We're moving that money back to them. So it should then prevent the need to double tax for events and things that are being paid for traditionally by the borough. The money goes back to the town council. Town council can provide it. Of course, they can augment them and improve them, but those are entirely up to them. And by the time, I think also the 3 years is quite important, because if we're going to harmonise our council tax over the same length of time, then you'll find that, you know, at the moment you can make the argument about whether or not there's more council tax being paid in the borough. Well, there is, but then there's top-up amounts coming from town councils. That gets smoothed away. So I think this is a neat and tidy solution to prevent double taxation and to ensure that those budgets that did transfer in are being transferred straight out, and they're going straight out on day one. So I hope everybody, and I know there was a lot of concern and a lot of worry that the big bad West Northamptonshire Council was going to swallow that cash and it would just get lost somewhere amongst the 320 odd million, and it would only be it would be seen as spare change down the back of the sofa. That's certainly not the case, and I think again our actions speak louder than our words. On day one or before day one, we're transferring that money that has come in straight in the front door and straight out the back door to pay for the things for which it was raised. So I hope people can take us on trust that we're doing the right thing by the taxpayers in Northampton. So the proposition is that we recommend that we approve the transfer of the responsibility for the events and festivities set out in the report to Northampton Town Council, and delegate authority to the Executive Director of Finance in consultation with the portfolio holder for finance to finalise the arrangements for the transferring and scope covered by the funding. Are we agreed? Anyone against? That is carried. Thank you. So item 16, Northampton Borough Council report in the public interest regarding the council's loans to Northampton Town Football Club. Catherine.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a report that in January, Northampton Borough Council received a public interest report under the Local Audit and Accountability Act in relation to accounts ending the year 2016 and relating to events which took place some years earlier. When a report is received from an auditor during transition, the receiving council must consult the successor council under the transition regulations, because the successor council will complete the work identified in the action plan. Northampton Borough Council published the report and considered a draft action plan within the required timescales, and subject to the consultation, will sign off the action plan at their cabinet meeting tomorrow. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Jonathan, do you want to come in?
No, I'm not sure if I've much there to add. I mean, as members will be aware, Catherine quite rightly points out, the initial mistakes that were made were dreadful mistakes. They have been some time ago, significant corrections put in place, but this is really important. It gives us further information, and the most vital thing is that we completely take seriously every possible recommendation. So I'm delighted that this is going through the full governance of both the borough and indeed now into the West. Thank you, Ian.
Yeah, thank you. I think we all know there's a lot of history from a lot of councils as to how we got to where we are. So we need to learn the lessons where they need to be learned and leave the baggage outside of West Northamptonshire Council, so we all move forward with that fresh start that we've all been promising ourselves, and harping on about history, whether from wherever that history has come from, is not actually going to do any of us any good. But we do need to learn the lessons, and I certainly think that most of what's talked about, I know the borough put a lot of it right very quickly and a long time ago. It would be interesting as well. I think the public interest report should really be presented in a timely manner, because had you been waiting for it, all the bad practice could have been going on for many, many years. So, which I know was stopped quite a while back. So I'm sure we will pick up on those things as we design new systems, new processes, new ways of doing things. But all of it, from what I can see, is just acknowledged best practice, and we're not reinventing wheels. Any other comments? Right, so I shall move on to the recommendation, which is that we approve the draft action plan, which is Appendix C, is developed with more details such as timings and brought back to a future meeting of the West Northamptonshire Cabinet for a final approval. Are we agreed? Thank you. Any against? That is carried. So item 17, a new constitution for West Northants. Catherine again, or is this going to be Adam?
More than happy for Kath to introduce.
All right, sorry.
It does get rather technical, but
all right, well then,
fluent.
We better make sure we get the exactly right then. Catherine.
Well, there's not really much to say, Chair. Obviously, you'll be aware that the Constitution went through the Shadow Executive in February. When it did so, there were some bits that weren't complete. It then went on to the Shadow Authority when it was complete. And the bits that were Shadow Executive, which require the Executive to sign them off, now need to come back to the Executive. So those are the joint committees and the scheme of delegation, which has executive elements in it. So it's really just to sign off the executive elements that were already considered by the Shadow Authority on the 10th of March.
Okay. Well, that's all perfectly clear, Adam. What was not clear to you about that?
I didn't say that it was unclear. I just it could be rather technical. So
no, agreed. Any other questions or comments on it? So, are we? I shall move the recommendation then that the Shadow Executive approve the executive elements of the Constitution relating to the joint committees for the shared services and Children's Trust and the exceptions to the scheme of delegation. Are we agreed? Any against? That is carried. Thank you. So, it's item 18. Oh, right. So we got Children's Trust exempt appendix, but I don't think we need to worry about that at this stage. So we shall move on to item 18, which is the motion submitted by Councillor Randall. So this was discussed at the full council meeting last week. Sorry, this was discussed at the full council meeting last week before. I'm just trying to see. I have noticed that Miranda Wicks wishes to speak to these, and Emma Roberts as well wishes to speak to these two to this motion, and I think the same on 19. So well, Miranda, do you wish to speak? You have 3 minutes as a member of the public, but it is 8:45.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I do wish to speak to this, and thank you for raising this this important motion. 2020 will be a year that goes down that changes our relationship with food forever, and the COVID showed us that the food system was not fit for purpose. In an emergency, the most important aspect is to ensure that everyone has sufficient food. And following the first lockdown here in Northamptonshire, there were over 100 different community mutual groups that came together to fill gaps in getting food to people, either through donations from the public or from Fair Share. I worked with over 500 volunteers who reached into their communities, a social solidarity, and they developed a movement to help each other, which has been overriding positive society change that has happened this past year. Through a network of people working in their own villages, we were able to identify over 2,000 people who needed food due to the effects of coronavirus. Loss of jobs and wages, school closures and lack of school meals, limited childcare due to shielding or isolation, deterioration in health and mental health, domestic violence and abuse, isolation and loss, lack of respite, or many, many reasons, but they were also in addition to the people who were already regularly experiencing food poverty. But with a third lockdown due to come to an end, we need to consider how we'll achieve zero hunger in Northamptonshire. And there is a danger in creating a dependency culture and becoming complicit in the normalisation of free food delivery. Free food is right and appropriate during an emergency that is short term, but it does not address the core roots to why people cannot feed themselves. The biggest barrier to eating well is insufficient income, and people need to have the economic empowerment first and foremost, and finding ways to have affordable food that's reducing food waste must be considered the next option as we start to build a post-COVID society in the new unitary council. Volunteers within the community larders work with local community volunteer groups, and they have an inclusive offer where everybody in the community holds their own membership to make towards the cost of a healthy diet. After the emergency passes, we'll need to slow down, move out of this rapid response mode and gain some space and time for learning. To allow the flourishing of an adaptive strategy going forward, this year has been an amazing journey for hundreds of people that I have connected with, either receiving a food box or being part of its delivery to the door, my fellow volunteers. I have learned that never underestimate the power of people coming together. These rural larders are truly made here by the amazing people who've worked in West Northamptonshire, all of whom are determined to achieve zero hunger. I urge the council not just to consider the issues raised by the councillors, referring to the previous papers issued in Northampton Borough, but to include every resident, wherever they live, within the council, to ensure equity in the ways that the services are supported to the council in rural and urban communities. A future strategy to address food poverty needs to come from within the micro communities that form this new West Northamptonshire. The strategy needs to consider the wider food system, which is healthier, fairer and greener. The VCSE sector has demonstrated its ability to respond during a global pandemic through tremendous energy and flexibility and professionalism. We have found multiple ways to maintain human contact, acting as a conduit for help. Any future strategy needs to be co-designed and co-produced by the very people who have lived experience and who have resourced this through the VCSE from the micro level up. The proven assets in each street, village and neighbourhood. This will be then a strategy to underpin the UN Sustainable Development Goal of zero hunger in 2020 in West Northamptonshire. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Miranda, for those rather powerful points. And can I also thank you for all the work that you and your volunteers and organisations have done over the last 12 months with COVID. I do remember probably this time last year, one of the very first emails we got was from you and Sophia, offering help with food distribution and those who were shielding and vulnerable. And I know you've done a great job, particularly in the South Northampton area. So thank you very much for that. I just want to place that on the record. Where's Emma gone? Oh, she's there. Emma.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Miranda, for all of your comments. It's great to see you here as well. All the work you and others have done, and all of our volunteer groups have done, has been essential to keep us going through the pandemic. There are several models of food provision running all across the county, and they're all serving a different purpose, and they're creating supportive moves to now move from crisis mode into normalising mode. But what we've got to remember is that the pandemic didn't create this crisis. It's heightened the crisis, it's increased the need, but it didn't create it. We had a poverty issue before the pandemic hit, and all that this pandemic has done is revealed even further some of the deeply uncomfortable truths about our position and the poverty of many. It's highlighted the further inequalities in society, and particularly across Northampton and the rest of West Northamptonshire. I work with very closely with the Food Aid Alliance, who are working to bring all of those groups together to understand what next. What do we do now? Because all of the funding's run out. We're being told there'll be no further government funding to support the need. So where is the food going to come from? Where is that support going to come from? The voluntary sector can't be asked to take this all on the chin every time. They've done a fantastic job, and I've worked with so many who deserve a medal for every day that they've worked, usually on top of their day job. But they can't continue to do that all on their own. And both of these motions seek to deliver an authority that says, no, you don't have to do that on your own. You're going to do that with us, and we're going to seek to underpin where the financials might come from. And we're going to help you help the communities survive, not just the pandemic, but survive the poverty that they were facing beforehand. The way to get things done, in my opinion, is to have an authority that says, we buy into that, we'll do that right from the top down, and to have an anti-poverty strategy right at the heart of every principle and decision that it makes. And again, both these motions look to do that. They look to provide sustainable food projects that take us through the coming years and not just deal with arising out of the pandemic. The biggest barrier to poverty, or dealing with poverty, is often placing poverty in different types of poverty, into silos on their own. So we investigate food poverty, and we investigate financial poverty, and we don't look at it as a collective, and an anti-poverty strategy enables you to do that. It allows us to get together and say, how are we going to stop this in our county? How are we going to make sure that as an authority, we do everything we can to ensure this funding comes forward? Now, I spoke a lot at full council on the motion, and I hope that the purpose of this executive considering the motions is to bring this into council policy so that we can try to move forward with both of the motions as put there. And I appreciate that it's late now, Councillor McCord, and you've been on a meeting for a long time, but this item, wherever it appears on the agenda, has to be debated properly and has to really be seriously considered by this authority as a priority for the people of Northampton and for the people of the whole of West Northamptonshire. Because if we don't do that, then we are doing our people a disservice. Where does the next step come from? If we're naive enough to think that the council tax reduction scheme is the saving of all of the problems in our towns and our county, then we've really got to rethink our position, because we've got to have an overarching strategy that covers all areas and looks to work with the voluntary sector, but also puts us at the forefront of that decision making. Thank you.
Ian, are you on mute?
I'm on mute. Sorry, Lizzie.
I thought that's what you were trying to say. I mean, there's very powerful words by yourself, Emma, and previously. I guess what I would like to see is some sort of hard facts in terms of what our public health facilities can look into in this to get some more context to what's being said here. I'm listening and I'm hearing, but I'd like to know the seriousness of what you are highlighting here in more quantitative terms. So that's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to acknowledge and to thank the voluntary sector for all they do, and in no way do I think that we should do anything that discourages them from doing this work. It's just, it's communities are all about. It's about looking after your neighbour, and to take over it as a statutory role would actually lose so much more than what we have at the moment with regard to people giving of their own resources to help those in need, not because they have to, but because they want to. But what I would like to, if this is, I would like to see, Chair, and I don't know how possible this is, but to have almost like a SARA. SARA is a problem-solving a way that the police deal with intractable problems, but to get together everybody around the table with regards to this, because the last thing I would want is any duplication of work, of financing, of resources. I would not want the voluntary sector to stop doing what they're doing, but they probably and may well need support. But to put together a multi-agency, both statutory and voluntary agencies together, to look at this problem, to look exactly what the problem is, and then where do we need to go, and what are the options to get there. I think it could have political oversight as well, but to get some really good minds together and to look forward, because we don't want to duplicate what the government are doing or what relief is available in this budget, or what we're doing here with reduction of council tax or other benefits. We need to look at this holistically, and what in West Northamptonshire Council can we do that actually enhances the support of those most vulnerable within our community. Rather than a motion here or a motion there, it really requires some clear political leadership in setting up this group, multi-agency group, getting buy-in from everybody to look at this intractable problem of poverty. How can we best deal with it? I think we could come up with some really innovative ideas that and be again at the forefront. You know, we want to be this fresh and vibrant new council. Well, you know, not only this, but there's the homelessness, sleeping rough question as well. You know, we could really bring together the great minds. It's not always about money. It's actually about sharing budgets, sharing resources, sharing ideas, and coming up with a holistic idea to in this particular area. I don't know how we do that, Chair, but I would be really keen to see that happen.
Jonathan?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think actually broadly we're all pointing in the same direction on this. I'd agree with many of the points said. I think COVID has highlighted the great support that's out there, and it's increased the capacity of the support that's out there. But as Emma rightly says, we're settling down into a business as usual. And there is a huge demand for this type of support. And to some extent, the whole nature of how it's emerged has made it, I don't like to use the word haphazard, but it's not clearly defined, and it'll be irregular in different parts of the West Northants area and so on. And following Liz's point, I think hard facts is crucial. In a way, I see what we're looking at here in this motion and the next as being something, the first step of which is to get the hard facts. In other words, we're about identifying the scale and the severity of the issue. We're about identifying the existing capacity, much of which will be voluntary, that's out there at the moment, looking for the gaps, working out how we fill those gaps. And also, of course, that knowing how that knowledge fits with existing information, like the the deprivation indices and so on. And I think the resulting strategy would include many of the elements mentioned in this first motion, and indeed many of the elements mentioned in the following motion. So it should include, you know, working groups of all different types, really, certainly a working group. It should encompass the food, the school children's food vouchers for holidays. Without a doubt, it should involve scrutiny. All of these are drawn from the second motion. And outputs from that might well be the lobbying of MPs. So I think what I'm saying is I'm really supportive of this. I think there's a job that's scoped loosely by this that needs further specific scoping. The first part is to urgently identify the scale and severity of the problem. The next is to come up with a strategy as to how we tackle it. So I think my thought is we should progress as soon as we can to start doing that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Well, having listened to what colleagues are saying, I think we need to take on board, particularly the co-designing point that Miranda has mentioned, and co-designing this with a voluntary mutual aid community and social enterprises. I think that makes a lot of sense. So I would suggest that we amend the motion along the lines of the executive develops an anti-poverty strategy that is worked through all service areas. It will include the recommendations from the Food Poverty Working Group passed at NBC Cabinet meeting and others to co-design the strategy with the voluntary mutual aid community and social enterprises. and then delete all the other words. Because my concern with some of these is that we're then attempting to prejudge the outcome. I'm more than happy to set up a group to go and look and assess and knock around all the ideas and discuss it. But I'm just a bit worried then that we've already given the answer before we start the investigation, and I would rather that they were not in any way fettered in where they would want to go and the questions they might wish to ask. So that's my suggestion to executive colleagues.
Chair, could we include other statutory agencies as well? I'm just
more than happy.
Yeah, because if you think about health, because there may be some things going on that are health that actually support this initiative, and we're not going to duplicate it, but we need to know it's going on. So one, we don't duplicate it, and then we include it in this multi-agency strategy. It can't just be down to the West Authority. It's got to be owned by all the statutory organisations involved in this and the voluntary sector, working together hand in hand, along with the business community as well. I think we've got something here, but we need to structure it, organise it. As Jonathan said, you scan what you've got, analyse that, respond, and then assess where you've gone. It's simple problem solving, and we should do that within a multi-agency working group, and we need to get on with it. To be honest,
we're happy to include statutory and voluntary, as well. So we include out as many people as we want. But I think it's important that we don't try and attempt to prejudge or say the successful outcome is going to contain this, that, and the other.
And that's exactly right, because it may well be that we will be reliant upon the voluntary sector to do stuff. But as long as they feel supported and it's part of an overall strategy, so we prejudge nothing. We come up with the right solution. Thank
you. Any other cabinet colleagues wish to say anything? Adam?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm broadly in agreement with the comments and the suggestions that you've made. I think we need to do a full, complete bit of work on this to make sure that we absolutely nail down the right way forward to tackle poverty in West Northamptonshire as it should be tackled. I think there's a world of good intent in both of the motions presented to council last time out, and they've set us in a direction that I think we're pretty much all in agreement with. But I often think that motions presented at council, which is effectively making policy on the hoof, is not always the best way to achieve optimum outcomes. The best way is to go through a proper bit of scrutiny work to develop detailed policy that takes into account all of the evidence and is subject to full public scrutiny, not just within the council but outside the council as well, drawing on all those relevant bodies with all of their expertise, and then we can determine how the council reacts and adapts. So I would echo your sentiments, Chairman, and support the amendments that you proposed.
Any other cabinet colleagues? So I will move then that we amend the motion as submitted to then read that this shadow executive develops an anti-poverty strategy that is worked through all service areas. It will include recommendations from the Food Poverty Working Group, pass at NBC Cabinet and others to co-design with statutory, voluntary, mutual aid, community and social enterprises. Are we agreed?
Yeah.
Any against? Thank you. So we move on to item 19, which is a motion by Angela Roy. And again, I've had comments that Emma and I think Miranda want to speak on this one too. And just so we're sure here, I want to get non-cabinet contributions out of the way first, and then we can have debate within cabinet. So Angela, I think this was your motion, so over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I very much appreciate some of the comments that have been made in the previous discussion, which I think were very very, very helpful. I just think this is something that we all understand is a key issue. A lot of the discussion in the last on the last agenda item seemed to cover this area as well, but I just wanted to make a few really quick points. It's really, really important that we build on the work that has already been done within the scrutiny of the Northampton Borough Council. There is already a lot of great partnership work being done. I'm just anxious that this should be inclusive of all of the West Northants area and make sure that actually all of that activity is taken on board. Lizzie talked about the need for cold hard facts. Within my presentation at Council, I drew attention to particularly the government's Healthy Start scheme and the fact that actually in a large areas of our authority, including my division, less than 50% of people who are entitled to this actually take up this offer. I think going into the new unitary authority, we will have the responsibility for public health, and there is an amazing amount we can do around that. It's really, really important that we focus on the work that local grassroots organisations, including the Food Aid Alliance, can do. But it's also really important that we highlight the kind of get the best out of national best practice, and that particularly means the kind of work of organisations like Sustain. And just again, thank you to everybody who has worked to relieve poverty in the area, and particularly food poverty.
Sorry, I'm on mute again. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you, Chair. And I will try to keep it brief. I'm really pleased that the earlier motion has gone through to some degree and extent, and I don't disagree with the comments that people were making. The voluntary sector absolutely have a part to play, but it can't be all borne on their shoulders is the point that it needs to be made. And also the money is running out, and a lot of the food aid provision is about money. We need finances to purchase it, and as an authority, we need to be supporting that. The second motion looks further into the sustainable goals and the sustainable food place that we should become. Again, Anne-Joan has highlighted that we've already got people working at this, and we've got groups already setting up a sustainable food place or trying to make West Northants become a sustainable food place. It's not just about food, and that's about education, about cooking, about growing, and about how as a collective we can stamp out all of those things that we know contribute to poverty. One of the things that Lizzie said was about cold hard facts, and if you take a look at the Northampton Borough Council overview and scrutiny report that I'm very proud to have been involved in, the cold hard figures are very much detailed in there, and there are a number of reports that you can read where you can see just exactly how we are fixed in Northampton and surrounding areas. Although it didn't cover the whole of West Northamptonshire, and it needs to, I think we need those exact same figures and reports. And I agree with Councillor Brown that we need scrutiny. I would welcome the opening of a scrutiny immediately on what poverty looks like across West Northamptonshire. And we need to map the provisions that we've got across the area with all organisations and understand where support is being given. And again, the Food Aid Alliance have stepped up to do that already, and they have a directory of food aid providers across West Northants, or anybody that has been involved within the Food Aid Alliance group. But I think it's so important that we don't underestimate the importance of this authority's involvement in these projects, and we don't underestimate the authority's involvement in making sure that we reach the sustainable food goals that are set out in this motion. We should make this our priority. And I'm disappointed that the previous motion didn't look at Living Wage Foundation or Living Wage Accreditation. And you don't write policies in motions, but neither motion asks you to write policy. What it asks you to do was make sure that all of these items are at the centre of everything that this authority does. We've got to make sure that as an authority, we look at how people are feeling within our town and within the county, and we understand what their needs are. And the the heart of this motion for me is taking that anti-poverty strategy that one step further. And it may well be that you determine that a scrutiny group is the right way to go forward. And I would actually be comfortable with that, bringing those groups together, hearing from those providers who are on the ground offering the service, and then working through what as a council we can do to prevent poverty across the whole of the West Northants. Thank you.
Miranda?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick follow-up. Yeah, just pick up on Councillor Bowen's point about mapping. I think that is absolutely true. There's a lot of information that South Northants Council have included in their Building Stronger Communities strategy, which will help to add to that. But also Northamptonshire Acre has done some work recently on a food strategy, which highlights that there are people in West Northamptonshire living in food deserts where affordable good food is just not available. And they also often don't know where to get help. So there's a lot of information out there, but it is about pulling it together. And I totally support Councillor Roberts' point about making sure that this is inclusive. It does need to be funded, but it needs to be funded in a way where it's very transparent and clear, and so that everybody, even very small micro-organisations, get a part of that, where we actually measure the social impact of each of that contribution. Thank you.
I don't see anybody else who's not who's non-cabinet, non-executive members indicating to speak. So I shall now ask cabinet colleagues for your thoughts and comments.
Yeah, it's all connected, really. I would almost say it's the first motion covers, because all these elements are going to be talked about. You know, I don't think anything is off the table. Nothing is on the table and nothing is off the table. It's about identifying the extent of the problem. First of all, it's understanding what are we tackling and what do we want to achieve. And once we've done that, we can then decide on the tactical options to get us to the point of resolution. So I would go along with what we've already been talking about: form, some sort of body, task and fit, whatever we need to identify and gather all the intelligence that we have on this problem. What do we want to achieve, and then how do we get there, involving voluntary and statutory agencies? I know that's very simplistic, but for me, it's about that. It's not about UN Sustainable Development Goals. It's about the problems we face in Northampton and the needs of the people of Northampton and whatever they are, and we need to make sure that their bellies are full and that they have shelter over their head. And for me, it's as simple as that.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. A similar approach to Richard on this, in that I don't think a poverty strategy, as mentioned in the first motion, would in any way be complete if it didn't seriously consider all the aspects of food poverty. And I'm not trying to belittle any aspect of this or narrow the work down. In fact, on the contrary, I would strongly suggest that as that work develops, it has to continually review the contents of both of these motions to ensure that it's addressing all the points that it does. And at such time as something is produced, it should make sure that it gives answers or comments against each of these points. I don't think any single point should be lost, but I do think this is one overall subject that must consider all aspects of poverty, including food poverty, and it must do that in thorough detail. Thank you, Chair.
Fiona?
Part of my points really were covered by Richard, because I think, as he said, we are in a situation of there should be nothing on the table to start with, because we're happy to look at all aspects of this and bring it all together into one place. Because I thoroughly agree with what the ladies said at the beginning, that the effort that they have put in during this pandemic is not sustainable, even with funding for these volunteers. They're working 5-6 days a week from giving out food parcels to people. They cannot continue in that way. So we have to look at a better way of managing this system. But just to point out that there is will in our county. we were one of the first councils to put forward the plan to provide the free school meals in the school holidays, and we are continuing that during the pandemic period, and we will be discussing that, I'm sure. Well, I shall bring it up later for the future as well, and probably we need to lobby government under that subject to see if we can get some funding to provide that money for all of the holidays to come, because children that need food don't stop needing food in holidays. So I think we need to look at that as well. But I just wanted to agree with Richard's comments that I think nothing is off the table. We need to bring everybody together to discuss it and make sure that we're not all doing the same thing in different places.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. And it's been a really interesting debate, and I think we are all agreed on the necessity to tackle food poverty. But it's not just food poverty that affects people who are in the situation. And if you look at the budget of the West Authority, so much of it is to supporting the vulnerable in our communities in whichever part of the directorates we're looking at. So it's a thread that runs right through everything we do. And the families that are in food poverty, you will also find are in fuel poverty, access to fuel, energy, electricity. They go hand in hand. I think Emma referred to the council tax reduction scheme, which I think we'll all admit is only a small part of what we can do on a very specific area of the budget. But it does indicate an intent, I think, on the part of us all. And this debate has indicated that I think on this we are all as one, but it's a whole area of poverty we need to tackle to lift our population and improve their life chances, improve their end-of-life care. And we mustn't forget education. I think poverty of education, and I think perhaps the attainment in some of our areas is not as it should be. And it's a very, very wide subject, which I think as a council, we are determined to tackle.
Thank you. Any others?
Right, Chair, can I just make... Sorry.
Yeah, crack on.
It was just one real small point, something that Fiona said that prompted it. The objective cannot be to keep people in poverty. The objective can't be to make people rely upon the state. Objectives must be for people to become self-reliant, educated, and be able to enjoy the opportunities life presents. So that's where I think we've got to be more innovative, to think this is about bringing people out of poverty, not keeping them in poverty. So we have to look at their immediate needs, absolutely, but the longer term aim has to be for self-reliance and then education, and then making themselves positive lives where they no longer need the state, they no longer need the food bank, they can sustain themselves and in turn help others.
Yes, thank you, Richard. So in terms of a way forward, I think from what everyone is saying is that we need to try to link this motion with the other motion and do it. So to that end, I will propose then that we amend this to say that the shadow executive resolves to ask the anti-poverty group that we've set up in our previous 18 to develop further understanding of the council's role around food supply resilience and insecurity. And again, I propose that we just stop there instead of again trying to prejudge an outcome and trying to say, and it must do this, that, and the other. These could be more good sets of heads of terms of the areas into which they may want to investigate, rather than actually saying, and it'll only work if it has this, and this in it. That is not to say that many of the objectives in terms of UN sustainable goals or writing to our MPs or getting government action or whatever are not required. But I just think we should be saying to them, go and do your work and come back with some recommendations, as opposed to saying, the answer is this, doesn't matter what the question is. So that will be my proposal, that we bring it together in one sort of enhanced group, and then get let's get it on. I'm conscious of the fact that if any groups that we set up will need officer time. I don't see the point of setting up two that are going to be doing things which are very inextricably linked, as you rightly say, Richard. And I would rather that we had one big job done properly and done well than to have many little groups all nibbling around the edges of a problem. So that's my proposal, that we amend this to read that the anti-poverty group is asked to develop further understanding of the council's role around food supply, resilience and insecurity. So I move that as a proposition. Are we agreed? Any against? Thank you. That is carried. So item 20 was the exempt items on the Children's Trust, which we don't need to go to because I don't think we had any questions that needed to take us into that territory. So at item, have we got any urgent business?
Chair, sorry, the exempt item was an appendix to a report that has some recommendations.
Oh, apologies. So item 20 then is to resolve to exclude the press and public.
Chair, sorry to interrupt. There's a report and 3 appendices. Only the last one is exempt, so you can discuss the report in public.
Okay.
It's only if the content.
If we stray into the text.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So item 20, Children's Trust arrangements. My apologies. And as Paul has just said, 2 of the 3 are white paper. 1 of them is pink paper. Then we will have to move to exclude press and public and stop the YouTube broadcast. So Fiona, are you wanting to introduce this?
I think Kathy's introducing.
Kathy.
Chair.
Okay, Kathy.
I think this is Kath. It's not Kathy.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
It's Anna, actually. It's Anna.
All right. Can somebody please do it?
Right, I will do it. Sorry, thank you, Chair. I just said that I would make sure that it set in context. I'm very aware, obviously, of time and everything, but a number of members have asked questions about the Children's Trust arrangement and specifically about the paper that we've put forward you today around a joint committee. So what we've got up on the screen at the moment is something that just summarises, and I just very quickly want to give you some background and context to this before just asking Kath to very simply summarise what we're talking about. So in terms of the Children's Trust, as you know, the direction of the Secretary of State has set out how we need to work, and the Children's Trust needed to be set up, which we've obviously now done. The work and our relationship with the Trust, though, is set out in a contract. And the department has set out exactly who sits on which committees and which boards and how oversight of the Children's Trust is managed. So there are kind of 3 key areas where we manage the oversight of the Trust. One is the performance management framework, which goes through a number of KPIs, which you will have seen set out in the business plan that Colin presented earlier. The core contract, which is called the service delivery contract, which sets out the arrangements, how we share information, what we pay the Children's Trust and how we pay that, and what we expect from them. And the final thing is something called the support services arrangements. And those are services which we as a council, West Northants Council and North Northants, supply back to the Children's Trust to make sure that they can operate. And that includes a range of things, including IT, payroll, and various other arrangements too. You just go on to the next slide, please, Paul. Thank you. So it's important to understand then that the contract also sets out in the arrangements governance. And there are, in effect, kind of 3 core areas of governance. One is the strategic group. And this is the main strategic group on which the lead members sit. And the membership of that is dictated. So it is actually the lead member who sits on that alongside the lead in the Children's Trust 2, the operational group, which is chaired by Kathy, and which has officers on it and kind of prepares the ground, if you like, for the strategic group and the review of what they do. and the Support Services Board, again, which looks at how we provide services back to the trust. The Joint Committee is the main vehicle which we have now set up, and that is the purpose of this report, is just to talk about the Joint Committee, not about membership or the operation of the strategic group or the operational group, which is set out in the contract. But the Joint Committee is chaired by councils. It's a council board, and it is about our arrangements and relationships between us and the trust in terms of those support services arrangements. And it's about that Joint Committee that this paper comes. Various members have asked about opposition membership on any of these groups. We are unable to change the membership of the strategic group or the operational group, as I said, which was set out by DFE and set out in the contract. And the Joint Committee, as I said, it is an officer group which is between ourselves and the trust in terms of our joint arrangements. In terms of where members get sort of oversight and more information, obviously, about what the Children's Trust is doing, we just go to the next slide, Paul. The contract again sets out where and how that's done, and the democratic meetings at which we can hold the Children's Trust to account. And those democratic meetings are described as the Cabinet, scrutiny committees and other relevant committees where we agree with the trust that they will attend. And the contract again is very explicit that means in terms of the 2 new unitaries, each unitary can call the Children's Trust to one of those meetings 3 times in any 1 year. So I just thought it was worth sharing that with members in advance, and we'll circulate that if you haven't seen it, just to summarise how the arrangements work between us. And if I just hand over to Kathy, what we just wanted to do, sorry, not Kathy, to just summarise then, it's the Joint Committee papers that we're now bringing to you, which is about how North and West work together and manage the relationship with the Children's Trust in relation only to the Support Services Agreement. Thank you. Do you want to just carry on from there, Kath? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. So the situation is that when the trust was set up, it was set up in the name of the County Council. And as with all of the transition arrangements, what we now need to do is to make sure that that works effectively. All those agreements that Anna's just set out to you work effectively as with the 2 successor councils. And so what this report is doing is putting those arrangements in place which enable us to turn the county council into 2 successor authorities. It's not affecting the substantive arrangements that were put in place last November in relation to the trust. So that's what you're being asked to consider, and we need these arrangements in place to be safe and legal for day 1. So that's why we're doing it. I don't know that there's anything more I need to say really, and the recommendations are there as set out. As with the shared services agreements, we need a delegated power because we're still finalising those agreements at the moment.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Fiona, do you want to say anything?
No, I think Anna put forward very clearly the position that we're in, and this is just for those add-on services that the trust requires to get from the councils going forward. So as she's explained very succinctly, I think, the exact position that we're in.
Okay, and Cathy Hadley? I get me Cathy's and me Kath's all untangled.
Thank you, Chair. I think Anna set out very clearly the governance arrangements from through the contractual arrangements for the trust and also the support services into the trust, but also the arrangements between the North and West councils, and well as the arrangements between the support services and North West councils. It felt very complicated when I just said it then, but I think the graphics that were set out clearly explains that for everybody to see.
Yeah, no, I think that particularly that first slide that says they do this and we do that, and in turn they provide that, is really helps clarify. When I first saw that, I said it was quite enlightening, and I stick by that. So I think we should send that to as many members as possible, because it genuinely does bring light. I did have advance notice that, and I can't remember, and I seem to have lost a bit of paper now, that either Anjana or Emma wanted to speak, but I think both of them have dropped off the call. so if they're not here, then I will move on. But I just want to make sure that they're not, you know, I'm not trying to exclude them. They did register their interest in this item.
I had Councillor Emma Roberts, but you're correct, Chair.
It was, yeah, it was either one or both of them. Yeah, thank you, Paul. But they're not on the call. So we'll. Any other cabinet colleagues got anything else to say on this? No. So I shall now move that. What's the recommendation on this? To note the. What's our recommendation on this one? To note the Children's Trust arrangement. Is that it?
No, it's more extensive.
Yeah,
than that.
I'm trying to find the recommendation. Hang on.
No. Chair, if I can help, it's
you can help would be helpful.
To note the Children's Trust governance arrangements which become operational on 1st November 2021.
Yeah.
To agree the structure of the joint arrangements between North and West Northamptonshire, including joint committee, joint officer board, support service agreements and SLAs, interface agreement, and the other documents necessary to enable the transition to the two new councils, including the deed of variation for the existing service delivery contract between the Children's Trust and Northamptonshire County Council, and to delegate to the Director of Children's Services power to finalise the support services agreement, the interface agreement, and any other documents necessary to give effect to the Children's Trust governance arrangements prior to the 1st of April 2021, and to make any necessary minor operational changes to enable the transition to the two councils of North and West Northamptonshire.
Thank you, Paul. I did find him there in the end. So are we agreed on that? Any against? No. So that is fine. We don't have any other business. I am unaware of any urgent items that have been presented to me. So at 21:32, I shall close the meeting. Thank you all for your time. It was a bit of heavy lifting tonight, but we managed to get through an awful lot. I'm fully confident now, having put these last building blocks in place, that we will have something that's safe and legal in a week's time. I see Kath is smiling. I take it that's a smile of relief. So I'm sure we'll all meet again shortly, but stay safe. Thank you all for your time, and I wish you a pleasant rest